Chapter 173. It had to be said that Ong Kwangsung's battle strength was very strong. After years of fighting against the demonic sects, especially when the Blood Demon Palace launched a large-scale attack, those who survived were all people who climbed out of a pile of corpses. Not to mention cultivation just based on battle experience, it was not something an ordinary person could compare with. However, Guan Yu's subordinates were also not ordinary. They were the outstanding disciples of the three major sects, and they were able to survive the trials in the Demon Ghost region. Every one of them was not simple. However, when comparing the two sides, Ong Kwangsung was definitely at a disadvantage. First of all, Guan Yu's side had more people, and their cultivation was generally higher than the other side. In addition, these years of intensive training, their ability to fight together was very strong. Guan Yu rode the red rabbit on top of a mountain and looked down. Xianxia landed next to him on his sword. The two of them looked at each other and looked down at the same time. Ong Kwangsung didn't escape for long before he was stopped by the black-clothed people. The black-clothed people who came from behind immediately surrounded them. Ong Kwangsung and the others probably knew that they had no chance of survival. Wu Baoru let everyone huddle together, and 6 nascent soul stage elders led the way. They desperately rushed out, hoping that one of them could escape. But was it possible? The company commander coldly snorted, waved his hand and shouted, "Strangle them." More than 100 black-clothed people each took out an arrow talisman and threw it out. Rays of yellow light shot out, and Ong Kwangsung and the others were instantly forced into a panic. Following that, more than 100 flying swords flew over and screams could be heard. When the black-clothed people retrieved their flying swords, the ground was covered in blood, and not a single complete corpse could be found. The battle ended in just a few moves. Guan Yu looked down and shook his head. "Boss, my squad can take care of these people. Is there a need to call out a company? It's always good to be careful. You must know that our army's follow-up forces have not caught up yet, and we still haven't replenished our manpower. If we lose one person, our formation will be incomplete and that will be a loss. It's safer to fight with numbers." Xianxia said in a low voice. "Prepare to go back." Guan Yu nodded and galloped down on his horse. He circled around the area a few times and confirmed that Ong Kwangsung's people were all dead. After that, the entire group became one again. Xianxia flew down and covered it with his divine senses. He instantly returned to Utopia. Glancing at the severed limbs on the ground, Lu Jingguang and Wu Baoru could be considered to have completely disappeared. However, they had died a little too quickly, which was a little different from his original plan. The sword shot out and flew away from this place. Returning to Bai Zitsong and the rest, Xianxia stared at Chu Ping'er and said in a low voice, "They're all dead, including that eunuch husband of yours. Shouldn't you give me an explanation now?" "Brother, you guys talk. We'll go back first." Bai Zitsong glanced at the two of them and said. It seemed like it was a little inconvenient for the 4 of them to stay here while they were talking about such a topic. Xianxia nodded and continued to stare at Chu Ping'er, Bai Zitsong, and the other 2 as they left on their swords. "Why aren't you talking? Do you still remember the promise you made to me back then? Do you know that I'm here to pick you up from Ong Kwangsung? I've never forgotten my promise to you." Xianxia's tone was calm, as if he was talking about something that had nothing to do with him. Chu Ping'er smiled sadly and said, "Didn't you see everything? What else do you want me to say? Anyway, I'm sorry." As she said that, she took out an exquisite storage pouch from her clothes and rubbed it in her hand. Xianxia squinted his eyes. He recognized that it was the storage pouch that he gave her back then. Chu Ping'er held it out with her slender hands and said, "I didn't use any of the spiritual stones inside. I'm returning it to you." Xianxia's expression was dead, and there was no change in his expression. He said calmly, "I have a lot of spiritual stones. It's more than enough to buy you back from Ong Kwangsung. I'm not a gentleman and I'm very selfish. If you really want to return something to me, then return the feelings that I gave to you. Can you return it to me?" Chu Ping'er squeezed the storage pouch in her hand, and a stream of tears began to flow down her face. She looked at Xianxia and shook her head as she cried, "What do you want from me? I've already said it. I want you to give me an explanation. Is this making things difficult for you?" Xianxia said softly. "Xianxia, please let me go. Do you think there's a need for an explanation?" Chu Ping'er shook her head. "Is there a need? Fine, I'll tell you a story." Xianxia looked at her and said slowly, My home is in Wuxia's Swallow City. I'm sure you've been there before. Once when I was playing in the wilderness I saw a woman washing her hair next to a stream. I only took a glance and was deeply in love with her. I couldn't help but stare blankly. But when the woman saw me, she glared at me and flew away on her sword. From that day on I missed that woman all the time. I finally knew that the legendary celestial beings were real. So I searched everywhere for the path of cultivation, not for anything else, but to see her again. Hard work pays off. Later I joined Ong Kwangsung. Coincidentally, the woman of my dreams was also Ong Kwangsung's disciple. The way the two of them met was really funny. I accidentally saw the female disciple bathing. I think you should know who I'm talking about now, right? Swallow City. Swallow City. Chu Ping-er murmured as if she was thinking about something. After a long time she suddenly raised her head and said, "That young man was you?" Yu Qiancho nodded and said, "Yes, you remember now. From the first day I joined the cultivation world until now, it can be said that everything I did was for you. Can't I get an explanation from you after I've sacrificed so much?" Chu Ping, are you going to treat me so cruelly? You don't even give me a reason to give up. Aren't you too heartless? Chu Ping-er was a little speechless. She really didn't expect Yu Qiancho to be so devoted to her. What about me? Tell me why you were with Lu Xingguang. Ever since I saw you in Hundred Flowers Valley today and found out about your situation, I have always believed that you had no other choice. I have always believed that. Yu Qiancho looked very affectionate and he gave off the feeling of Granny Wolf patiently guiding him. After some torment, Chu Ping's tightly clenched teeth were finally pried open by him. It turned out that when Lu Xingguang had an accident in the Hundred Flowers Valley, the head of Ong Kwangsung, Lu Chongqing, was furious and almost killed Chu Ping. Chu Ping's master Li Rulon argued strongly and risked defending the head to save Chu Ping. Originally, Chu Ping-er had thought that the matter was over just like that. However, after Lu Xingguang recovered from his injuries, he continued to pester Chu Ping. Since Yu Qiancho was already in her heart, it was only natural that she would ignore him. In fact, if Yu Qiancho hadn't revealed Lu Xingguang's matter, until now most people in Ong Kwangsung didn't know what kind of injury Lu Xingguang had suffered. Even Chu Ping-er herself didn't know that he was actually a eunuch. Later, Chu Ping-er's master Li Rulon made a big or small mistake. In fact, who could not make a little mistake? However, offending the head was offending the head. Lu Chongqing used this as a pretext to make a fuss. He was determined to kill Li Rulon. In order to save her master, Chu Ping-er had no choice but to beg Lu Xingguang. The latter gladly agreed, but only on one condition, which was that Chu Ping-er had to become his cultivation partner. On one hand, there was the promise of her sweetheart, and on the other hand, there was the kindness of her master, who was like a mother to her. Chu Ping-er was in a dilemma. In the end, she agreed for the sake of her master. In the end, her master was saved and she became Lu Xingguang's dual cultivation partner. That was how the story went. Yu Qiancho didn't expect that he was the reason why this matter ended up. However, after thinking about it, he felt relieved. Even if he didn't castrate Lu Xingguang, that bastard would still have a way to deal with Chu Ping. However, what he couldn't figure out was how a castrated person could have dual cultivation with Chu Ping. Yu Qiancho asked with a strange expression, "Lu Xingguang was castrated by me. Dual cultivation." That Chu Ping-er was not a fool. She naturally understood what he meant. She shook her head and smiled bitterly. "I never let him touch my body, so he often hit me. First I thought, who knew that you..." She paused and gritted her teeth. "You're really a pervert." Yu Qiancho's eyes lit up and he asked, "You're saying that up until now you've never let him touch your body? Then you..." Although he didn't finish his words, Chu Ping-er already understood what he wanted to say. She shyly nodded, but then her expression darkened again and she said, "But what can I do? Everyone in the cultivation world knows that I'm his dual cultivation partner." Waha! Yu Qiancho suddenly raised his head and laughed wildly. Chapter 174. Yu Qiancho was very pleased with himself. Not just a little pleased but extremely pleased with himself. Fortunately, he didn't like that bastard Lu Xingguang back then, so he took the initiative to castrate him. Otherwise, he would have suffered a huge loss. He really had great foresight. Just think about it, Which man would be able to hold himself back from having such a beautiful woman by his side? Only that silly girl, Chu Ping'er, would be so confident and think that she could protect herself. As a man with bad intentions and a man who was in an absolutely dominant position, it was a piece of cake for him to lay his hands on any woman he wanted. Yet you refused? You think you're smart? You're running to the heavens. It's only a matter of time before I get you into bed, and there are thousands of ways to deal with you. Putting himself in her shoes, he didn't believe that if you put a good cabbage in a pigsty, there would be a pig that wouldn't go for it. Of course, Xianxia had already admitted countless times in his previous life and this life that he wasn't a good person. Otherwise, he wouldn't have used his own yardstick to measure other people's heart and killed Lu Zhenguang so early. But now he was deeply rejoicing that his actions back then were simply too wise. Chu Ping'er looked at him with complicated feelings and tears rolled down her cheeks. Seeing him laughing so crazily, she thought that he was laughing out of extreme anger, laughing at her for not being able to stand her ground. In this era, a woman's reputation in this aspect, whether it was in the secular world or the cultivation world, could not be tarnished. Men could have multiple wives and concubines, but women couldn't. Once they married someone, they would belong to that person for the rest of their lives. In fact, ever since Chu Ping'er agreed to be Lu Zhenguang's Dao companion, she no longer had any expectations for the future. She guarded her body with all her might, and silently stood by Xianxia in her heart. All of this was just a dream of a woman who had fallen in love with someone. Although she knew that her dream would never come true, this dream was really beautiful. It was the motivation for her to live on. The more Chu Ping'er thought about it, the sadder she became. He cried out loud. Today her dream was finally shattered by Xianxia's laughter. She didn't expect that her dream would be so fragile in front of Xianxia. Her heart, which had long been broken into pieces, was once again shattered. Where should he go from now on? Seeing her cry so sadly, Xianxia was stunned and reached out to pull her. Chu Ping'er quickly stepped back, shook her head and cried, "Don't touch me. You know everything now. Are you satisfied now? Can you let me go now?" Let you go? If you don't go with me, where do you want to go? Xianxia said in surprise. At first he was worried that Chu Ping'er had been violated by Lu Zhenguang. After all, eunuchs were physically immature. Their personalities were more distorted. To put it bluntly, they were perverts. If that was the case, even if he accepted Chu Ping'er, he was afraid that his heart would be as uncomfortable as swallowing a few flies. Now the grudge in his heart was gone. What he cared about was that Chu Ping'er's body was still pure. What he cared about was that no other man had touched Chu Ping'er's body before him. What he cared about was that Chu Ping'er's virginity still belonged to him. As for what would happen in the future if Chu Ping'er was cursed, saying that she was a whore or a slut, sorry, if you have the ability, come at me. I will kill you. In order to protect the woman I love, I will do anything. Go with you. Chu Ping'er thought that she had heard it wrong. For a moment she forgot to cry. She didn't believe that Xianxia would bear the curse of seducing other people's wife for her. But he also didn't know what Xianxia cared about. Of course, the premise of all this was naturally that Xianxia had feelings for this woman. As long as a man wasn't sick, he would do it. Xianxia strode over and hugged Chu Ping'er tightly in his arms, unwilling to let go. He whispered in her ear, "It's all my fault. I should have made up my mind to take you away from the beginning. All the hardships you've suffered were all caused by me. I really, really regret it. Don't cry anymore. If you cry again, I'll feel even worse than you. Come with me. I won't let you suffer even the slightest bit. Trust me." Chu Ping'er buried her head in his arms and cried even harder. The muffled sound made people feel as if their hearts were being torn apart. After crying for a while, Chu Ping'er suddenly pushed him away. She shook her head and said, "No, I can't go with you. This will ruin your reputation. It's unfair to you. I can't abandon my master." Xianxia's face twitched. Master, it's master again. If I don't kill you, don't you know how to turn back? Damn it. Which be asterisk he did this to my woman. I will kill you sooner or later. After slightly suppressing the anger in his heart, Xianxia walked closer and said softly, "Reputation is really worthless to me. Ping'er, go with me. Don't worry, I will definitely go to Ong Kwang-tsung and find your master to accompany you. Don't lie to me. You have killed so many disciples of Ong Kwang-tsung. How can you go back to Ong Kwang-tsung? Even if you go back, the people of Ongquangsung will definitely not let you go. Chu Ping'er cried as she retreated. I lied to you? Yu Qianzhou was angered by her. He shouted sternly, what kind of bullsh*t is Ongquangsung? I swear to the heavens that if I don't flatten Ongquangsung, I am not a human. Let's see how you can go back in the future. Chu Ping'er was stunned by his words. She forgot to cry. Can a cultivator's oath be casually made? What are you looking at? Other than coming with me today, you can't go anywhere else. Yu Qianzhou's face was filled with anger. He walked over and hugged her. The two of them immediately disappeared without a trace. When they reached Utopia, Chu Ping'er was still in a blind impulse. She did not notice that the scene around her had changed. She struggled desperately in Yu Qianzhou's arms. In a fit of anger, the latter carried her and teleported to a lake. He threw Chu Ping'er into the lake and shouted, I will wake you up. Chu Ping'er immediately flopped around in the water. Although she was not in a deep position, she was still drowned by the sudden fall. When she regained her footing, she quickly walked towards the shore. Yu Qianzhou stood on a large stone platform by the shore with a gloomy expression. He was indeed angered by her. Suddenly his expression froze. After Chu Ping'er's white dress was wet, the moment she walked out of the water, it immediately wrapped around her beautiful figure. Yu Qianzhou only felt a surge of heat rising from his abdomen. An irrepressible urge appeared in his mind. He felt that there was an evil fire that needed to be vented. He immediately leaped over, opened his arms and hugged Chu Ping'er in his embrace. Chapter 175. The water grass by the lake was plump, but there was a disharmonious scene. The woman was pressed on the grass. Her soaked clothes were torn to shreds. There were only a few pieces of cloth hanging on her body, revealing her white and tender skin. Her plump body was exposed to the air. She was being crazily assaulted by a pair of big hands. She struggled, but she was powerless to resist. The man was dizzy with desire and he forced himself in regardless of anything. Powerless crying, painful moaning and heavy breathing gradually mixed together, destroying the tranquility of the lake. In the grass not far away, a few colorful pheasants poked their heads out and looked around. Everything was over. The two naked bodies hugged each other and stopped moving. The lake returned to its tranquility. Chu Ping'er obediently curled up in the arms of Yu Qianzhou. The latter glanced at the former and finally let out a comfortable breath after venting the evil fire. He pulled out a grass and put it in his mouth. Looking at the blue sky, there was a trace of a proud smile on his face. Women were often like this. If a man did not make the deepest breakthrough in her body, she would always leave some leeway and would never really treat you as her man. The so-called platonic love in his previous life was pure F***king nonsense. Some self-righteous guys took the feeling as love and described it to be very beautiful. In the end, some people were fooled into expecting and longing for this kind of love. In the end, they still couldn't resist the temptation of the body, and something that shouldn't have happened happened. Their bellies were still big. Only talking about love but not doing it? What a pervert. Was that still called love? In the words of Yu Qianzhou, this kind of adulterous couple should be dug, separated, and buried alive so that they could be platonic forever. Qianzhou. Yes. Chu Ping'er moved her body and slightly raised her head. She looked at him with eyes that were still full of lust and said, You said you would bring my master. Don't worry. I will definitely bring your master. Although this was what Yu Qianzhou said, his eyes flashed with a trace of fierceness. It could be said that he hated hearing her mention her master the most. He thought to himself, whether your master is dead or alive, I will bring him to you. After saying that, Yu Qianzhou pushed her away, picked up his clothes and put them on. When he turned around, he found Chu Ping'er curled up her limbs. She could no longer find any clothes to cover her body. Her plump and fair body was exposed to the air, and it was indeed very attractive. Yu Qianzhou picked up the two storage bags not far away. One was the one he gave her and the other was also hers. He believed that the clothes she wanted to change into should be inside. After giving it to her, Chu Ping'er quickly took out a set of clothes and put them on. Then she gently leaned on Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou did not stay in Utopia for too long. He returned to his room in the Cultivation Alliance. As soon as he left the room, he met his senior brother from supporting Immortal Island, who told him that Elder Quan was looking for him. After meeting Elder Quan Deming asked about what had happened between him and the people from the demonic Dao in Hundred Flowers house. Yu Qianzhou told him about what had happened in the demon region. Quan Deming naturally understood and did not ask much. Then he met Qing Gingqing, who had come to look for him. The two of them had done many transactions in private and were old friends. Qing Gingqing acted as the host and found a tavern. The two of them did not talk about anything serious before leaving. The shopkeeper recognized him at a glance. Last time when Yu Qianzhou came, he saw that he was very familiar with Bai Zizong and the others. He knew that he was Bai Zizong's friend, and so he led him to the courtyard behind the shop. Yu Qianzhou saw that he was very familiar with Bai Zizong and the others. In the end, the four of them were gathered there waiting for him. The four of them were shocked by the strength that Yu Qianzhou had casually displayed. They thought that it was a secret force from supporting Immortal Island. In the end, the guy on the horse said, "What is supporting Immortal Island?" and changed their minds. There was actually a force that did not take supporting Immortal Island seriously. In that case, the force that was displayed this time was definitely not all. The four of them were even more shocked. To put it bluntly, the existence of such a powerful force with unknown background could completely threaten the safety of the four families. As the successors of the four families, it was impossible for the four of them not to be concerned about this. They all wanted to understand a thing or two from Yu Qianzhou. To Yu Qianzhou, it was naturally intentional to reveal a bit of his strength in front of the four of them. The five of them sat around a table and were served fragrant tea. Bai Zizong smiled and asked, "Is everything settled?" "Damn it. Fortunately, I castrated that bastard in advance. Otherwise, I would have suffered a great loss." Yu Qianzhou snorted. The few of them understood what he meant. He was telling them that Chu Pinger was still pure. Bai Zizong frowned and said, "Brother Yu, have you considered the consequences of this? If others knew about this, I'm afraid that Brother Yu would be condemned by everyone and supporting Immortal Island's reputation would be tarnished. Anong Kwang-tsung would definitely not let you off." To them, no matter what happened in the past, stealing someone else's wife was still a little hard to accept. Yu Qianzhou sneered and said, "I'll chop off whoever dares to point at me. No matter how important supporting Immortal Island's reputation is, it can't stop me from finding a woman. As for Ong Kwang-tsung, it's already good enough that I didn't look for him. If they dare to look for trouble with me, then they must be tired of living. Moreover, if the four of you don't say anything about this, who else would know?" The four of them were stunned. Yu Qianzhou pointed at them and it felt like he was warning them not to speak about what happened today. Otherwise, if the few of them knew about it, how could they talk about it? "Brother Yu, who are those men in black? Why didn't we four families know that there's such a force in the cultivation world?" Bai Zizong asked casually. Yu Qianzhou smiled and said, "Do you mean the entire cultivation world or the cultivation world of the Wuxia Empire? If it's the entire cultivation world, I believe there are many things that you four families don't know about. For example, how much do you know about the Phantom region?" Tan Fei was stunned and said, "The cultivation world that we're talking about is naturally the cultivation world of the Wuxia Empire. Could it be? Brother Yu, are you saying that those men in black don't belong to the cultivation world of the Wuxia Empire?" "I didn't say that. You said it yourself." Yu Qianzhou joked and took a sip of the fragrant tea in his hand. He shook his head and said, "Forget it. You don't have to ask about this. There won't be any harm to your families. It's not that I don't want to tell you, but it's for your own good. Knowing too much about some things isn't good for the four families." Seeing that he was being so mysterious, the four of them didn't ask any more and changed the topic. Bai Zizong smiled and said, "The four of us have been out for a while. We're going back today. I wonder if Brother Yu is interested in visiting the four families?" Yu Qianzhou put down the teacup in his hand and scratched his head and said, "I want to go, but I don't know if I can leave. I have to ask for permission." "Alright, what do the four families do for fun?" Bai Zizong pouted at Wu Liqing and said, "The Wu clan's auction business is famous in the entire cultivation world. Recently, the Wu clan will be holding their biggest auction in 5 years. At that time, there will definitely be a lot of rare items appearing. I wonder if Brother Yu is interested in taking a look? Cultivation World's auction? I haven't seen that before. I really want to go." Yu Qianzhou was excited. He then shook his head and said, "Sigh. I don't know if our Elder Guan will let me go. If that's the case, why don't the four of us accompany you to the Cultivation Alliance to ask for permission? I believe your Fuxian island will give us some face. What do you think, brother Yu? Bai Zitsong smiled. That's great. Let's go now. Yu Qianchou stood up and said happily. The four of them laughed and stood up. For the four of them, for the sake of their clans, rather than worrying about the black-robed man's threat, it was better to be friends with him. Yu Qianchou was a very good link, and this was also the reason why Bai Zitsong had warmly invited them. Chapter 176. As the five of them walked through the market talking and laughing, someone suddenly shouted, Mr. Yu. They stopped. Yu Qianchou looked back and saw Donghua Su, who had sold him the white talisman, running over happily. He couldn't help but wonder, didn't you say it would take at least 2 to 3 days? Why, it's only been a day and you're back? Old man Donghua sized up the other 4 cultivators and discovered that none of them were cultivators that he could see through. He then cupped his fists toward Yu Qianchou and said with a smile, Mr. Yu, it's like this. I've prepared some food and wine at home, so I'd like to trouble you and your companions to come to my place for a while. Yu Qianchou felt more and more strange. He said, Donghua Su, this is only the second time we've met. Why are you inviting us to eat and drink? Donghua Su looked around and seemed to be a little worried. He just nodded and bowed and said, Please do me the honor. It won't take much time. They looked at each other and finally nodded slightly. They all wanted to see what this old man was up to. Yu Qianchou looked at him for a while, pinched his chin and said slowly, Old man Donghua, don't play tricks on us. Otherwise you won't be able to bear the consequences. Lead the way. Donghua Su said eagerly, I don't dare, I don't dare. Just like that, the 5 of them were easily lured away. It was mainly due to their curiosity. After leaving the market to the south, there were many houses not far down the slope. They were all built by people who had been making a living here for a long time. Over time it became a residential area. The 100 Flowers Valley was doing business with people all over the world. Naturally it needed some people. As long as there was no problem with their origin, they were allowed to develop. Of course, the rules of the 100 Flowers Valley were still obeyed. Otherwise they wouldn't be able to stay here for long. Donghua Su led them to a secluded courtyard and said with an apologetic smile, This is this old man's residence. It's a little shabby, please excuse me. The few of them looked around. Although the courtyard was small, it exuded elegance and was not as shabby as he said. It was a good place to live. However, there was something strange about this matter. Yu Qianchou frowned and said, Old man Donghua, don't keep me in suspense. Just say what you want. Yes, yes. Donghua Su shouted into the house, Old woman, is everything ready? Done. A middle-aged woman dressed in a secular household's attire walked out and bowed to the crowd. She looked much younger than old man Donghua, but it was unexpected that she was the old woman he had mentioned. The few of them checked again. Her cultivation level was at the final stage of the foundation establishment realm, which was slightly higher than Donghua Su's. This was not hard to explain. Usually, those who had better talent and improved their cultivation level in a timely manner would naturally be better at delaying aging. The few of them scratched their heads and were invited into the main hall by the couple. A table full of fragrant aroma wafted through the air. A sumptuous feast of wine and dishes were already waiting for them. Donghua Su filled their cups and invited them to eat. His wife, on the other hand, stood at the side with a faint smile on her face. Her cultivation level was clearly much higher than her husband's, but she was willing to serve as a foil. She was a good wife who lived at home. The moment Yu Qianchou smelled the wine, he knew that it was the 100 Flowers Valley's good wine, the 100 Flowers brew. He glanced at the woman standing at the side and said with some mercy, Mr. Donghua, this pot of 100 Flowers brew costs a lot. It'll probably be difficult to buy a pot even if you sell talismans for half a year. How can we drink this wine in peace? If you have something to say, just say it. Don't beat around the bush, I'm confused. A trace of embarrassment appeared on Donghua Su's old face, and he nodded to his wife. The middle-aged woman smiled apologetically at everyone and quickly brought a child about 7 or 8 years old from the side room. The child's big black eyes curiously looked at the few people in front of him. The woman next to him gently patted his back and he immediately bowed to the few of them. The few of them were even more confused. They looked at each other, but even with their intelligence, none of them could figure out what was going on. Yu Qianchou smiled bitterly and said, I say, Mr. Donghua, what do you mean by this? You treat us to wine and let us watch this child. Could it be that this child has some background? Dong Wuxia smiled apologetically and said, to tell you the truth, this child has no background. He's my grandson. When we were young, we had wandered in the cultivation world and knew that it was full of dangers. We had long been tired of this kind of life and just wanted to live a peaceful life. Later, after we had a daughter, we were even more unwilling to take the risk, so we settled down in this 100 Flowers Valley. With this feeling, we naturally didn't want our daughter to walk on the path of us again. 10 years ago, she found an ordinary man in the secular world and married him. Who knew that when I went to visit her last year, she and her husband died in a war? The grandson they left behind also wandered outside and begged for half a year. After I found him, I brought him back. Wait. Xianxia waved his hand and said, Mr. Dongguo, what do you mean by telling me this? You said it very clearly, but the more I listened, the more confused I became. What do you mean? Dong Wuxia looked at his wife and said to Xianxia, our daughter's death was a big blow to us. We have learned from this painful experience and can't let our grandson walk on the same path as our daughter. We can't bear the pain of seeing our son die before us. My grandson has some spiritual roots, so I sincerely hope that Mr. Yu can recommend my grandson to supporting Immortal Island for cultivation. So that was the case. Bai Zitsong and the rest smiled, but Xianxia's face twitched a little. Why are you looking for me if you want to send your grandson to supporting Immortal Island for cultivation? Isn't there a shop of supporting Immortal Island in this 100 Flowers Valley? Why don't you just send your grandson there? Mr. Yu, don't you know that supporting Immortal Island always finds its own disciples and never accepts disciples who send themselves to the door? Dong Wuxia was surprised. Xianxia was startled. Supporting Immortal Island seemed to have such a nonsensical sect rule. Oftentimes, some disciples who were expelled from the sect couldn't even find their original home. However, it seemed like he had indeed gone to look for them. However, that was because he had the Immortal supporting token. Xianxia smiled bitterly and said, there are many cultivation sects in the world. Why do you insist on sending your grandson to supporting Immortal Island? For example, my 4 friends are from the 4 major clans in the cultivation world. It's not a bad idea to send your grandson to the 4 major clans to cultivate. The 4 of them rolled their eyes. They had never seen such a person. Don't push it to us even if you don't want to. They were all young people. Who would be willing to accept a disciple for a sect? It was a strenuous and unrewarding task. Bai Zitsong smiled and said, Brother Yu, don't you understand Mr. Dongguo's meaning? Mr. Dongguo wants his grandson to have a higher starting point. Besides the world's #1 sect supporting Immortal Island, who else can have such a starting point but me? Mr. Dongguo, is this what you mean? Dong Wuxia nodded and said, this Mr. is right. This old man has the same intention. Please help me, Mr. Yu. Xianxia was stunned and said with a smile, Mr. Dongguo, you are really calculative. I don't think I told you my surname is Yu, right? Mr. Yu's name has been spreading in the 100 Flowers Valley for the past few days. There's no need for you to tell me personally. Dong Wuxia smiled embarrassedly. In fact, he had only heard about Xianxia's deeds yesterday. He really didn't know him, including when he was selling the white talismans. Later on, not long after Xianxia left the stall, there was a show with the demonic cultivators. The old man happened to close the stall and went to watch the show. The result made his heart palpitate. So this kid is Xianxia. He eats both the righteous and the demonic cultivators. He's amazing. Therefore he set his sights on him. Early in the morning he was waiting at the market. Seeing that he was invited by the shopkeeper of the Bai clan's shop, he clicked his tongue again. He knew that he would have to come out again. Therefore he spent a lot of money to buy a bunch of things for his wife to prepare, and he went back to wait. Hard work pays off. Xianxia was finally tricked by him. Tan Fei chuckled and said, Brother Yu doesn't need to say his name in the 100 Flowers Valley. The other 3 couldn't help but chuckle. Xianxia smiled helplessly. He didn't know whether he should help or not. He waved at the kid and said, Come here. What's your name? The kid looked up at his grandmother. Seeing her nod, he walked over and said shyly, My name is Hongqi. Hongqi, why do you have such a strange name? What did you say? You're Hongqi? Xianxia suddenly thought of a famous person, the beggar sect's leader Hongqi. But this little guy still wanted to eat. Damn. He'll definitely be an amazing person when he grows up. Chapter 177. Dong Wuxia smiled. His father's surname is Hong. He was born on the 7th day of the 7th month, so he is named Hong Qi. I hope he will be easy to take care of. Yu Qianqiu nodded and touched Hong Qi's bones. As expected, he had spiritual roots for cultivation. He muttered in his heart, "Damn it. Guan Yu is already following me, so why should I give Hong Qi to supporting Celestial Island? They should all follow me. When I gather East Heretic, West Poison, South Emperor and North Beggar, let's see who is stronger than me." With this thought, Yu Qianqiu touched his nose and smiled at Dong Wuxia. "How about this? Your grandson should be my disciple since I haven't tasted being a master yet." Dong Wuxia and his wife looked at each other. "You are so young?" The two of them hesitated. The four of them felt weird too, as they didn't see anything special about this kid. Why did this guy want to take a disciple? Did he have nothing better to do? Bai Zitsong snorted at the couple. "Brother Yu is willing to take your grandson as his disciple. That is his fortune." The couple regretted it as they felt like they had invited a wolf into their house. However, they couldn't afford to offend any one of them. Dong Wuxia smiled. Since he is Mr. Yu's disciple, he is naturally a disciple of supporting Celestial Island. It's the same. Who said that? My disciple is my disciple, and supporting Celestial Island's disciple is supporting Celestial Island's disciple. Don't mix it up, Yu Qianqiu said in disdain. The couple exclaimed at the same time as they couldn't understand the difference. Dong Wuxia had a weird expression. "Is Mr. Yu not a disciple of supporting Celestial Island?" "I am a disciple of supporting Celestial Island. What does that have to do with my disciple?" Yu Qianqiu said, and then casually said, "What is supporting Celestial Island?" No one was deaf. Although his voice was soft, they all heard it. The couple was a little confused. Bai Zitsong and the other three exchanged glances. Could it be that this kid would join the mysterious force behind Yu Qianqiu that didn't even put Fuxian Island in his eyes? The four of them immediately looked at Hong Qi in a new light. "Hong Qi, from today onwards I'm your master. Kowtow and acknowledge me as your master." Yu Qianqiu sat up straight. It was his first time accepting a disciple, so he was very formal. Hong Qi looked at his grandfather and grandmother, who were in a daze. Seeing that they didn't object, he obediently knelt down and kowtowed 3 times, calling him master. By the time the couple realized what was going on, it was already too late. Their grandson had already gone through the ceremony. Yu Qianqiu pinched his chin and looked at Hong Qi from left to right. He felt that everything about him was good. The more he looked, the more satisfied he was. Suddenly he said, "Oh right. I forgot to give you a greeting gift." He took out a storage bag and put it on the table. "There are 1,000 high-grade spirit stones in here. It should be enough for you to cultivate to Qi training level 10. Then he took out 2 things and put them on the table. "These are 10 foundation establishment pills. When you reach Qi training level 10, you can use them to build your foundation. If it's not enough, I'll give you more." The group of people was dumbfounded. 1,000 high-grade spirit stones and 10 foundation establishment pills. Could this guy be the god of fortune? Bai Zitsong, who was sitting next to him, picked up a foundation establishment pill with a purple aura. His face kept twitching. "Is this the legendary Dan Halo? What does a kid's food have to do with you?" Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes. He snatched the foundation establishment pill from his hand and put it back on the table. Dong Wuxia let out a breath of cold air. He said to Hong Qi, "Hurry up and thank your master." The couple spent a lot of effort to get a foundation establishment pill back then. They knew very well how important it was to cultivators. The reason why he allowed his grandson to join supporting Immortal Island was because the #1 sect in the world would give him 3 chances to reach the foundation establishment realm. Once he succeeded in his cultivation, he would not be easily bullied. However, Yu Qianqiu gave him 10 chances at once. Basically, it would not be a problem for him to cross the foundation establishment realm. What else could he say? Hong Qi knelt down and kowtowed 3 times. He said in a childish voice, "Thank you, master." Yu Qianqiu was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth. He pulled Yang Kai over and patted Yang Kai's head. Glancing at the storage bag on the table, he said, "I gave you spirit stones for cultivation, but I forgot to give you some pocket money." Saying this, he threw out another storage bag and said, "Here are 1,000 high-grade spirit stones for pocket money." The group of people was completely speechless. This little guy calling him master was too expensive. 1,000 high-grade spirit stones for a master. Wasn't he just trying to scare people? That was incredible. This little guy really had a rich master. After his excitement subsided, Xianxia remembered that they still had some matters to attend to, so he stood up and said, Mr. Donghua, your grandson will remain here for the time being. You'll be guiding him in his cultivation, and when he reaches the foundation establishment stage, I'll naturally personally guide him. As for the matter of him becoming my disciple, keep it a secret for now. I don't want anyone else to know. I hope you remember that. Understood. The husband and wife bowed. Xianxia nodded. He patted Lil Hongqi's head and said solemnly, work hard on your cultivation. Build your foundation as soon as possible. When that time comes, you'll be free to explore the cultivation world. Lil Hongqi seemed to understand. Let's go. Xianxia said to the four of them. Wait. Bai Zitsong smiled. Since Brother Yu is taking in a disciple, how can we not give him a gift? I'll represent the four of us to express our gratitude. He took out a token and turned to Lil Hongqi. I'm not as rich as your master. This token is for you. If you have any trouble in the future, you can take this token to the Bai family's shop in the 100 Flowers Valley. It should be of some help. Hongqi took the token. He didn't know the meaning behind it. However, his grandparents naturally knew. Of course, the things given by Xianxia and Bai Zitsong would also be kept by his grandparents. In the end, the five of them left without eating anything. They even lost a bunch of valuable items. However, they also gained a disciple. The four of them congratulated him along the way. Xianxia accepted it gladly. He was really happy. When they arrived at the entrance of the Cultivation Alliance, although the two disciples guarding the entrance knew Xianxia, they still stopped by Zitsong and the other three due to the rules. Xianxia couldn't do anything about it. He could only accompany the four of them and follow the rules. The four of them were here to make Xianxia proud. There was nothing to hide. They directly reported their identities to the disciples guarding the entrance. A disciple immediately asked everyone to wait. He turned around and went to report. After a while he got permission to let them in. The four of them looked around and didn't find anything strange. When they arrived at the main hall of Fuxian Island, Xianxia shouted at the door, Disciple Xianxia is here to see Elder Quan. Come in. Quan Deming shouted from inside. After the five of them entered, Xianxia immediately told him who they were. The four of them greeted him one after another. Quan Deming was very polite to the heirs of the four great clans in the cultivation world. Although they were not as strong as the supporting Immortal Island when they joined forces, they were not something ordinary sects could compare to. After knowing that the four of them were here to invite Xianxia to the four major families as a guest, Quan Deming considered for a moment and agreed. If it was Xianxia who wanted to go, he wouldn't agree. So many people from Fuxian Island had informed him. Something happened to Xianxia, how was he going to explain to those people? The invitation from the four major families was different. Firstly, it wasn't good to humiliate them. Secondly, with them around, Xianxia shouldn't have any mishaps. After coming out, the five of them agreed to set off early the next morning. They were going to the place that Xianxia was interested in, the Wu clan's auction. Chapter 178. It took less than half a day to travel from the 100 Flowers Valley to Ongquangsung on a flying Dharma artifact. Logically speaking, Wu Baoru and the rest should have returned yesterday. However, there was still no news of them. Lu Chongqing sat cross-legged on the cattail hassock in the middle of the green light hall and felt that something was wrong. Could it be as he had guessed? Would supporting Xian Island make a move on Lu Jingguang and the rest? Originally, he was worried that his guesses were unnecessary. The dignified supporting Xian Island would disdain to do such a thing. However, for the safety of his grandson, he still took precautions. Now, he recalled the news from the 100 Flowers Valley. Unexpectedly, Xianxia, whom everyone thought was dead, was still alive and had actually joined supporting Xian Island. Moreover, from the analysis of the few news that came, this kid seemed to be doing very well. He had a lot of faith in both the orthodox and demonic sections. Although he had beaten up Lu Jingguang, Lu Zhongqing thought about it again and again and decided to temporarily swallow his anger. Back then, he had almost forced Lu Jingguang to his death, so it was reasonable for Lu Jingguang to have this grievance. The situation was stronger than the person. It was not the time to get back the face that he had lost. Junior brother, have the people we sent returned? Lu Chongqing asked an elder sitting below. Seeing that his grandson had not returned, he sent 2 elders to check what was going on. He could only hope that what he was worried about would not happen. The elder pondered and said, the 2 junior brothers went in the direction of the 100 Flowers Valley. They should be back soon. As soon as he finished speaking, a 9th-generation disciple ran in a panic. After bowing, he looked embarrassed and couldn't say a word. Lu Chongqing frowned and reprimanded, why are you so flustered? If you have something to say, just say it. Is there news from the 2 elders? The 9th-generation disciple said embarrassedly, the 2 elders are back. They respectfully invite the sect leader to go to the mountain gate. Lu Chongqing couldn't be bothered to argue with this disciple. Right now he was most concerned about his grandson. He got up and walked out of the hall. The elders on both sides also got up and followed. A group of people quickly passed through the square and arrived outside the mountain gate of Ongquangsung. At this time there were already many people gathered here, but their expressions were not very good. Seeing the sect leader and the elders come, they all gave way to them and bowed. Lu Chongqing anxiously said, is there any news from the 2 brothers? Junior brother, the elder said anxiously. Elder, Lu Chongqing said. What appeared in front of Lu Zhongqing and the others was a large pile of bloody severed limbs on the ground. Not a single complete corpse could be found. There were also 2 storage bags thrown to the side, which were obviously the things that had been brought back from the dismembered corpses. On a stone platform a little further away from these things, there was a single head. One could vaguely make out Lu Zhengguang's face. The bloody scene in front of them couldn't cover up the beautiful scenery around Qingguang Mountain. But at this time who could appreciate it? No one dared to make a sound. Lu Chongqing's breathing was getting heavier. His eyes were wide open as he stared at Lu Zhengguang's head. His whole body was trembling fiercely. After a long time he closed his eyes and exhaled. Controlling his emotions, he asked in a hoarse voice, where did the 2 junior brothers find them? Reporting to the sect leader. One of the elders cupped his hands and said, the place where they were found was less than an hour away from the 100 Flowers Valley. Judging from the solidified blood, I'm afraid that not long after they left the 100 Flowers Valley, they were attacked. There were traces of fighting there. That is to say, the person who killed them also came from the 100 Flowers Valley? Lu Chongqing asked with an ashen face. The elder nodded and said, from the surrounding traces, it is quite possible that Elder Wu and the others were pursued from the direction of the 100 Flowers Valley. There is another matter that is rather strange. Zhengguang. He paused, pointed at Lu Zhengguang's head and said, Zhengguang's head was scattered several tens of meters away. Seems that it was kicked out by someone. What? Lu Chongqing's figure swayed. Who had such a big grudge against my grandson? Who killed him and then kicked his head again? After stabilizing himself, the bones in his whole body cracked. He gnashed his teeth and squeezed out a few words. It's Yu Qianchou. Yu Qianchou probably wouldn't even dream that when he saw Lu Zhengguang's head at the scene of the murder, he was very displeased and immediately kicked it far away. Who knew that just based on this point Lu Chongqing intuitively judged that it was Yu Qianchou who did it? Who knew how he judged it? The others also had doubts about the sect leader's judgment, but they couldn't say anything. An elder beside Lu Chongqing consoled, sect leader, please restrain your grief. There will definitely be a day when the truth will come to light. The ashen-faced Lu Chongqing slowly closed his eyes and said in a deep voice, bury them together in the back mountain. After saying that, he resolutely turned around and left. He really wanted to find his grandson's body, but it was already like this. Was it still necessary? The most important thing at the moment was revenge. It was night, the sky was filled with bright stars. There were countless stars on Qingguang Mountain. A figure streaked into the night sky. In the back garden of the Yu Mansion in Swallow Zicheng, Xue Ernyang was preparing to go to the wing room to rest. 2 servant girls carried lanterns and led the way. Suddenly someone said, Xue Dainiu's descendant, come here. Xue Ernyang and the 2 servant girls were startled. There was a lantern hanging in the pavilion of the back garden, and below it stood an old man with a horsetail whisk in his hand. He looked like an immortal, but it was a little strange for him to appear here in the middle of the night. The person who came was the sect leader of Ongquangsung, Lu Chongqing. Celestial Master. Xue Ernyang recognized him at a glance. She quickly walked over and with a face full of joy she bowed and said, Celestial Master, why did you come here so late at night? Oh, Celestial Master, please wait for a moment, I will call my husband and son to greet Celestial Master now. Hearing that it was Celestial Master, the two servant girls stood at the side, trembling with fear. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Wait. Lu Chongqing said in a deep voice. You mean your son is also here? Xue Ernyang was stunned. What? Celestial Master doesn't know? Didn't my Qianqiu tell you? AI. This child is really. There's no need to trouble yourself. Bring me to him now. Lu Chongqing waved his hand and interrupted her. Knowing that Yu Qianqiu was here, he didn't want to be long-winded anymore. In order to calm Xue Ernyang down, he actually squeezed out a smile on his face. Yes. Xue Ernyang didn't dare to say anything else and quickly led the way. The study room of the Yu residence was brightly lit. Yu Chang'e was sitting at the study table, looking at his youngest son practicing calligraphy. He frowned when a series of hurried footsteps came from outside. They had been husband and wife for many years. No matter how fast the footsteps were, Yu Chang'e could tell that one of them belonged to his wife. Why was she so impatient in the middle of the night? The half-closed door of the study room was pushed open. Xue Ernyang rushed in and said with a face full of surprise, Chang'e, the Celestial Master from Qianqiu is here. Yu Chang'e was shocked. Which Celestial Master from Qianqiu? Xue Ernyang stomped her foot and said, Which Celestial Master did you say? Of course it's the Celestial Master who took Qianqiu away. He's already outside. You two father and son, hurry up and greet him. What? Yu Zhanggui's entire body trembled. He immediately took out a small porcelain bottle from his bosom in a flurry and quickly opened the lid. He wasn't like Xue Ernyang who didn't know anything. Before his eldest son left, he talked to him that night and specifically mentioned Lu Chongqing. There was a great hatred between the two. The 3 porcelain bottles that his eldest son left behind were probably to guard against this person because only he knew where the Yu residence was. Don't delay anymore. You two father and son, hurry up and greet him. Xue Ernyang urged. Yu Wuqiu didn't understand what his parents were talking about. He held a pen in his hand and looked around. Yu Chang'e calmed his mind and changed his smile to his youngest son. Hurry up and follow me to greet the Celestial Master. No need. Lu Chongqing barged in by himself. His face was gloomy and his eyes flickered. In the end he didn't see Yu Qianqiu. He couldn't help but shout at Xue Ernyang in a deep voice. Didn't you say that your son is here? Where is your son? Xue Ernyang pulled up his youngest son who was kneeling and said, This is my youngest son Yu Wuqiu. The son you're talking about is him? Lu Chongqing felt like he was fooled. Xue Ernyang was still there and replied heartlessly, Yes. Yu Chang'e, who was a shrewd businessman, felt that the atmosphere was a little strange. He frowned and didn't say anything. In fact, Lu Chongqing and Xue Ernyang had a big misunderstanding in the backyard just now. The former thought that the son the latter was talking about was Yu Qianqiu, because he didn't know that Yu Qianqiu had a youngest son. The latter was used to thinking about problems with her brain. Of course, it had something to do with her not knowing about Yu Qianqiu's situation. She mistakenly thought that the former was talking about her youngest son. That was why this scene happened. Yu Qianqiu killed my grandson. Now that I can't find him, I have to bury your family of 3 with my grandson. Lu Chongqing's ferocious face was exposed. Yu Chang'e immediately pulled his wife and son behind him and stood in front of him. He said sternly, Old man, you're the leader of a sect in the cultivation world. If you want to take revenge, just look for my son. Why do you have to involve us ordinary people? The mother and son behind him were a little confused. They didn't know what was going on. Lu Chongqing's usual demeanor was gone. He laughed evilly and said, I kill if I want to. Do I need to explain to you? He shook the horsetail whisk in his hand. Chapter 179. Under the night sky, Ethereal Palace stood at the peak of the mountain, echoing the brilliant stars in the sky. It was isolated, quiet and charming. Yu Qianqiu, who had tasted the sweetness, pestered Chu Ping-er, and the two of them had another round of fun. After that, Yu Qianqiu pulled her up to the roof of Ethereal Palace, and the two of them romantically counted the stars. Wasn't he going to leave tomorrow? Perhaps he might not return for a few days. His new lover was about to be separated for a short period of time, so he couldn't forget to enjoy himself. Chu Ping stayed in Utopia for a day and understood that Yu Qianqiu was the owner of this place. In that case, she could barely be considered the female owner here. There was a hint of surprise in her shyness. However, when she saw Bai Suzhen, Chu Ping couldn't believe that there was such a beautiful woman in the world. Bai Suzhen didn't have any decorations on her. She was dressed in simple white clothes and a silk ribbon was gently tied up her hair. She walked up to Chu Ping elegantly and said with a gentle smile, "You're Chu Ping? We met in Ongquangsung." Bai Suzhen's appearance, demeanor and temperament made Chu Ping feel ashamed of her inferiority. For a moment she didn't know how to reply. Recalling the other party's words, she suddenly recalled the white fox she had seen in Ongquangsung back then. It was her. Compared to before, Bai Suzhen's face no longer had the hidden bitterness that had always been there all year round. Now there was a faint, calm and satisfied smile on her face. Compared to before, her elegance was even more exuberant and dazzling. At first glance, it was almost impossible to recognize her. But why was she here? Subconsciously, Chu Pinger had already regarded herself as the mistress of this place. After a day she understood one thing. Who was the real mistress of this place? Bai Suzhen. Even the male owner of this place was obedient when he saw her, bowing and calling her sister. Everyone in Utopia seemed to only recognize her as their mistress. If she said one thing, no one would dare to say another. Although this woman was very good to him, he couldn't help but feel a little jealous. "Qianqiu, when will you bring my master here? Are you sure about this trip?" On the roof of the ethereal palace, Chu Pinger was nestled in Yu Qianqiu's embrace on a large deck chair. Chu Pinger frowned and said, You have to trust me. You have to give me time. You have to know that this isn't something that can be done just because you say so." He had already forgotten how many times Chu Pinger had asked him this question. Sensing the slight displeasure in his tone, Chu Pinger climbed onto his chest, looked at him and asked, "Did I make you unhappy? Don't let your imagination run wild. There's nothing like that. I'm just thinking about how to save your master." Yu Qianqiu hugged the voluptuous and bouncy body that had climbed onto him, caressing it all over as his gaze lingered on the boundless starry sky. "Not good." Yu Qianqiu let out a strange cry. He pushed away Chu Pinger and stood up. His divine sense fluctuated, and after a brief check he discovered that the porcelain bottle he had left for his family had been opened. How could he not be shocked? He had instructed his father to only open it if he encountered any trouble that he couldn't resolve. Using the remaining drop of blood in the porcelain bottle, he spread out his divine sense to check. Other than his parents and younger brother, there was another person in the Yu residence's study. It was Ongquangsung's sect master Lu Chongqing. Yu Qianqiu roared, "Lu Chongqing, are you courting death?" Then he circulated his true essence and shouted to the foot of the mountain, "Yunchang, gather all the troops for me." His voice spread out, breaking the silence of the night. He seemed unusually agitated and restless. Lu Chongqing, who was in the Yu residence's study, had no idea that he had already crossed Yu Qianqiu's bottom line. "Qianqiu, what's wrong?" Chu Pinger climbed up, pulled him and asked. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and shouted, "Scram." Chu Pinger fell back onto the deck chair, and he had already disappeared from the roof, directly appearing in Bai Suzhen's room. Bai Suzhen was looking out the window in shock. She had also heard Yu Qianqiu's agitated and restless voice. She didn't know what had happened, but before she could react, Yu Qianqiu had already grabbed her lily-white hand and said anxiously, "Sister, my family is in danger." Without saying anything else, he had already disappeared from the room with her. Although Guan Yu's troops were already gathering urgently, he was still afraid that they wouldn't make it in time. If he went alone, he definitely wouldn't be able to defeat Lu Chongqing with his current cultivation. Thus he could only drag Bai Suzhen, who was in the final stages of tribulation, along with him. Inside the Yu residence's study, Lu Chongqing had just finished speaking, and a cold voice appeared out of nowhere saying, "How arrogant. What right do you have to kill as you please? You'll have to get through me first." Yu Qianqiu and Bai Suzhen suddenly appeared in the study. Yu Qianqiu stared at Lu Chongqing and sneered. Today he wouldn't let him go even if he died. Who told him to touch something that he shouldn't have touched? Lu Chongqing was stunned on the spot. Where did they come from? When little Yu Wucho saw his big brother, his face was full of surprise and the fear just now was gone. He immediately ran to Lu Chongqing and complained, "Big brother, he said that he wanted to kill his parents and me to be buried with his grandson. He's bullsh asterisk ting, just ignore him." Yu Qianchou pushed his brother behind him. He was now also relieved and he introduced them to Bai Suzhen. "This is my parents and brother." Little Yu Wucho poked his head out and stared at Bai Suzhen, nodding and saying, "Sister is so beautiful." Bai Suzhen smiled at him and then bowed to Yu Tongge and Shui Ernyang. When the couple saw that their son had come, they were already relieved. At this time they saw such a beautiful girl and it was brought by their son. They immediately looked at each other and immediately forgot the worries they had just now. Their eyes swept back and forth between their son and the beautiful girl, and there was a meaningful look in their eyes. Lu Chongqing was very excited by the happy family in front of him. He pointed his finger and shouted, "Yu Qianchou, it was you who killed Xingguang." Yu Qianchou and Bai Suzhen both took a step forward and blocked the three people behind them. Yu Qianchou laughed and said, "You dog, I really want to kill that damn eunuch with my own hands, but it's a pity that I can't do that." "What? Do you want revenge?" "To tell you the truth, the person who killed your grandson is outside. I'm afraid that you don't have the ability to take revenge and instead, you will lose your old life." "What? You didn't kill him? Then who else could it be?" Lu Chongqing shouted in disbelief. He had completely ignored the devastatingly beautiful woman beside him. "Humph." Yu Qianchou sneered and said, "You will know if you have the ability to go out and have a look." As soon as he finished speaking, the sound of footsteps came from all around, and from time to time, there were cries of alarm from the servants in the mansion. Lu Chongqing shook the horsetail whisk in his hand backhandedly, and a white light quietly hit a big hole in the wall behind him. It could be seen that he had an extraordinary degree of control over his cultivation. He rushed out in a flash and looked around, only to see that there were people in black everywhere. On top of the walls and on the roofs, there were countless of them. As soon as he came out, he was immediately surrounded by the people in black. Looking at the cultivation of these people, the lowest was at the core formation stage and there were even many at the late nascent soul stage. Lu Zhangqing, who had been blinded by hatred, suddenly sobered up. He was greatly shocked. He was only at the late nascent soul stage. How could he be so reckless? As the leader of a sect, he actually came out to seek revenge. It was already impossible to retreat into the house, and the hole in the wall was already guarded by 5 men in black of the late nascent soul stage. In the face of the threat of death, Lu Chongqing was scared out of his wits, and suddenly felt that his chances of survival were slim. Chapter 180. Yunchong, since this old man is here, don't let him go back. Yu Qianchou's voice floated out from the study. Shoo. A whistling sound came from somewhere and it was Guan Yu's voice. Most of the black-clothed men flew backwards, and the group of people surrounding him became much thinner, but there were still close to 100 of them. It should be known that this time, Yu Qianchou called out all 3 companies in a fit of anger. Lu Chongqing looked around vigilantly, and saw that most of the people surrounding him were at the late nascent soul stage, and the weaker ones were at the middle nascent soul stage. A fierce expression appeared on his face, and with a flick of his sleeve, a short flying sword flashed with a green light. In the blink of an eye, it expanded into a normal-sized flying sword. The body of the sword was blue, and it flashed a bewitching light in the night as it circled around his body. The horsetail whisk in his other hand was also flung away, and he slowly paced around in a defensive manner. Kill. Guan Yu's voice came again. Nearly 100 cold lights left the hands of the men in black, and they quickly shot towards Lu Chongqing. The latter quickly raised the horsetail whisk in his hand, and a strange phenomenon suddenly appeared. The horsetail whisk flashed with a white light, and the whisk instantly grew longer and spread out. Then it spun rapidly like an umbrella and a series of ding-ding-dang-dang sounds rang out. Nearly 100 flying swords were all bounced off by the flexible horsetail whisk. It was hard to believe that under the control of the people the flying swords attacked back and forth a few times, but they couldn't advance at all. Immediately someone exclaimed, "Bai Yi's horsetail whisk, sect leader Ong Kwangsung's top-grade defensive magic treasure. He is Ong Kwangsung's sect leader Lu Chongqing." What? Then someone else shouted, "Everyone be careful, that green flying sword is a top-grade offensive magic treasure. Ong Kwangsung's Green Destiny Sword. This group of men in black came from various major sects, and naturally there was no lack of people who knew their stuff. Although they had never seen Lu Chongqing before, they immediately recognized him based on these two magic treasures. One must know that the weapons used in the cultivation world are generally divided into three types: magic tools, magic treasures, and spirit treasures. Generally, the flying swords used by cultivators were ordinary artifacts, but there were also some that could be refined into high-grade artifacts with better materials. However, weapons that had reached the magic treasure level were extraordinary. Magic treasures were not something that ordinary people could afford to use. Not only were the materials required to refine them expensive, but there were also too few people who had the ability to refine magic treasures. Occasionally they would need to rely on luck to refine a good one. As for numinous treasures, he had only heard of them but had never seen them. Moreover, this person actually possessed a top-notch high-grade defensive magic treasure and a top-notch high-grade offensive magic treasure at the same time. Judging by the appearance of the magic treasure, who else could this person be other than the sect master of Ong Kwangsung, Lu Chongqing? Nearly 100 flying swords attacked again, attacking like a storm, but no matter how hard they tried, they could not break through the seemingly thin whiskers. This horsetail whisker is also a magic treasure? Yu Qiancho, who was watching the battle from the broken wall of the study, muttered. When Ong Kwangsung framed Wu Baoru wanted to kill him with a flying sword. He had seen Lu Chongqing's horsetail whisker easily subdue the flying sword. At that time he had thought that Lu Chongqing's cultivation was profound, but he had never expected that this broken horsetail whisker was actually a magic treasure. Although he had stayed in the cultivation world for a long time, he had never paid much attention to magic treasures. The key was that he had never seen them before, so he had no concept of them. The first time he saw one, he was sure that it was the diamond bracelet used by the disciple of the cultivation pavilion during the competition on Fuxian Island. Now he was already wearing it, but he had never used it. The reason why he hadn't used it was because he was afraid that one day, someone would use the same method to kill him. If that happened, he would die in vain. Now that he saw that the horsetail whisker could block the attacks of nearly 100 late-stage nascent soul cultivators, he immediately realized the benefits of a defensive magic treasure. He casually took out the bracelet and put it on his wrist. Then he injected a bit of his true essence into it, and a faint yellow light enveloped him. The more true essence he injected, the darker the color of the light enveloped him. After putting away the diamond bracelet, Yu Qiancho felt a bit depressed. Could it be that so many late-stage nascent soul cultivators couldn't deal with a late-stage nascent soul cultivator like Lu Chongqing? Lu Chongqing, who was relying on a magic treasure to defend himself, also came to a realization. That's right. What was he worried about? What was there to be afraid of? What was the point of having so many nascent soul cultivators? With Ong Kwangsung's two magic treasures in hand, what could they do to him? Lu Chongqing's old face revealed a trace of an evil smile. He used the horsetail whisker to defend himself while sizing up the attacking black-clothed men. When his gaze fell on the flying sword that was attacking him, his face immediately sank. The flying swords that came to attack were of various shapes and sizes. Some were from the supporting Immortals Island, the Myriad Devils Temple, the Deluo sect, the Hopeful Moon sect, the Corpse God sect, and their old enemy, the Blood Devils Temple. It was actually people from the top 3 sects of the righteous and demonic sects who had joined forces to attack him. How was this possible? Lu Chongqing shouted sternly, "Who are you people?" Based on his understanding of the righteous and demonic sects, it was absolutely impossible for such a thing to happen. Although everyone had been deprived of their original primordial spirits and trapped in utopia all these years, the changes brought about by the military-style spiritual training were difficult to underestimate. To put it simply, they had found spiritual sustenance. It was a spiritual belief that was different from when they only knew how to blindly cultivate in the past. Yu Qiancho knew this very well. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been so many extremists in his previous life. The power of spiritual belief was terrifying. This was what Yu Qiancho had constantly instilled in them. The attacks were getting more and more intense. Who would answer such a question? Otherwise, there would be no need to cover their faces when they came out to meet people. In fact, Lu Chongqing was really afraid that they were from the 6 sections. If that was the case, what was the purpose of these 6 sects attacking the Ong Kwangsung sect leader? Just thinking about it made one shudder. Could it be that they wanted to destroy Ong Kwangsung? Seeing that they did not answer, Lu Chongqing, who was shrouded in thousands of strands of dust, let out a sigh. The dust fluttered and instantly condensed into nearly 100 strands, spreading out like tentacles. Dozens of attacking flying swords were immediately entangled and taken away by the dust strands. The dozens of people controlling the flying swords were shocked. Once the flying swords were entangled by the dust strands, their connection with their divine senses was immediately severed. They could no longer control their attacks. In just a few moments, some people did not have time to withdraw their flying swords, and dozens of them were taken away by the dust strands. Yu Qianzhou let out a breath of cold air. Damn. This horsetail whisk was too awesome. It was obviously a defensive magic tool, but it actually had a bit of an offensive nature. It had taken away so many flying swords in one go. It was worthy of being the magic tool used by the Ong Kwang-tsung sect leader. Damn. This was troublesome. They could not kill this old guy. Lu Chongqing glanced at the surrounding black-clothed people and let out another sigh. The dust strands shook and flashed with a white light. Suddenly they grew several times longer, dragging dozens of flying swords and spinning at high speed. Someone immediately shouted, "Quickly get out of the way." Yu Qianzhou also realized the danger. While he was dodging, he did not forget to look at his parents. He saw that Bai Suzhen had already scattered a white silk and wrapped the family of 3. She waved her palm and sent the family of 3 flying far away. Crash, crash. A series of miserable cries rang out. Stone fragments and wood flew everywhere. In the blink of an eye, all the buildings within a radius of 10 meters were demolished by Lu Chongqing. Some of the servants who were hiding in the rooms did not even have time to escape. They were the ones who screamed. The spinning whisk stopped. At this moment, Lu Chongqing looked like he was covered in thorns from afar, making it impossible for anyone to attack him. He looked like he was invincible with a horsetail whisk in his hand. Yu Chonggrui and company, who were protected by Bai Suzhen, were all dumbfounded. They had never seen such a situation before. If they continued to fight, the entire Yu residence would probably be demolished. Guan Yu flew out from an alley and landed beside Yu Qianzhou. He asked, "Boss, what do we do now? We can't even get close to this old guy." "Let me do it." Bai Suzhen walked over. "No need for now. Big sister, I will make a move when I need you. I don't believe that so many of us can't deal with him alone." Yu Qianzhou turned around and shouted at the crowd, "I gave you so many talismans. Save them for later. Everyone attack together. As long as you can attack, attack. I don't believe you can't defeat him." Chapter 181. Hua. All 300 men took out a pile of talismans. Instantly, the sky was filled with dark yellow talisman shadows that shot towards Lu Chongqing from all directions. Lu Chongqing's horsetail whisk started to spin again and danced in an impenetrable manner. The talismans that were bounced off were arrow talismans, while the talismans that were bounced off were fire talismans. None of the talismans could get close to Lu Chongqing. Instead, the surrounding houses were all ignited by the fire talismans, turning the entire Yu residence into a sea of fire. The servants that were hiding immediately fled in all directions. Fortunately, no one stopped them, as those that weren't burned to death had already disappeared. "Damn. Stop. Stop smashing. Damn it, it's useless." Yu Qianzhou yelled as his house was about to be burnt to ashes. Everyone stopped, but Lu Chongqing shouted, "Yu Qianzhou, hand over your life." He could tell that if this continued, he didn't know how long it would take. The most important thing now was to kill this leader and think about everything else later. In the middle of the whisk there was a flash of green radiance. The green destiny sword flew up into the sky and dragged a green shadow behind it as it whizzed towards Yu Qianzhou. Bai Suzhen was shocked. Just as she was about to make a move, Yu Qianzhou shouted, "Go!" He pointed his finger at the green destiny sword and a series of sword radiance shot out from his storage bag towards the green radiance. It was the 100 flying swords that he had cultivated. Ding-ling-ling. An ear-piercing sound of metal clashing could be heard. The flying swords that collided with the green destiny sword were instantly shattered into pieces. The flying swords that followed after had the same outcome. However, the destruction of dozens of flying swords wasn't completely useless. At least it slowed down the green destiny sword's attack. When the green destiny sword's momentum was exhausted, the flying swords that Yu Qianzhou controlled immediately entangled it in the air. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Right at this moment, Lu Chongqing shouted again as he pointed his finger at the green destiny sword and stirred it. Amidst the group of swords that were fighting in midair, a green light flashed and the green destiny sword stirred. Ding-ling-ling. Another series of chaotic sounds rang out. Yu Qianqiu was instantly dumbfounded. His flying swords had all turned into scrap metal and fell to the ground. 100 flying swords were finished just like that. Damn it. Hi. Lu Chongqing pointed to the sky, and the green destiny sword flew to the top of his head with a swoosh. The handle of the sword was facing down, and the tip of the sword was facing the sky. He then flicked his fingers at the green destiny sword. A clear sword cry rang out in the air. Then the sword trembled and ripples of green light spread out in all directions. Damn it! What kind of trouble was this old bastard up to this time? Yu Qianqiu stared at the green destiny sword in the air and his face was twitching. So many people actually couldn't do anything to this old bastard. It seemed like he had to ask his sister for help. Weng. The green destiny sword in the air suddenly produced a sword shadow that was over 10 meters long. As Lu Chongqing continued to conjure his finger, the sword shadow gradually solidified. The magnificent sword patterns on the body of the sword could already be seen clearly, and it looked like a giant sword that was over 10 meters long was standing in the air. Go! Lu Chongqing shouted and pointed his finger at Yu Qianqiu. The giant sword that was over 10 meters long tilted its body, and the tip of the sword was pointed at the latter. With a whoosh, it sped up and attacked rapidly. Guan Yu let out a shout and leaped into the air. A giant saber that imitated the green dragon crescent moon saber appeared in his hand. He swung it with both of his hands and slashed at the giant sword that was coming at him with an imposing manner. Bang! With a loud sound, the green dragon crescent moon saber in Guan Yu's hand shattered into a few pieces, and Guan Yu was sent flying as he spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. Yu Qianqiu cried out at the same time. Instructor! The group of black-clothed men did the same. A few of them who were close to him flew up and faced the descending Guan Yu. It was said to be late, but in fact it happened very quickly. A series of scenes happened in the blink of an eye. The giant sword's momentum didn't stop, and the effect that Guan Yu had on it was almost negligible. Its target was still Yu Qianqiu. At the critical moment, Yu Qianqiu's body was enveloped by a dazzling golden light shield. At the same time, a white shadow teleported over and extended a black sharp claw to grab the giant sword. Other than Bai Suzhen, who was in the final phase of the Tribulation Transcendent stage, who else could teleport? At this point she couldn't wait for Yu Qianqiu to call out to her. In fact, Yu Qianqiu wasn't in a hurry to call out to her either. Creak creak creak. The sharp claw in Bai Suzhen's hand caught the sword, and it let out an ear-piercing screech. However, this green destiny sword was really powerful. Even with Bai Suzhen's cultivation, she couldn't completely stop its attack. Bai Suzhen was shocked and she immediately used her cultivation to the limit. However, the giant sword's edge had already pierced through the light shield on Yu Qianqiu's body. Bang! The sword's edge collided with the Vajra shield and the ground shook. The giant sword stopped its attack. On the other hand, the light shield on Yu Qianqiu's body dispersed with a bang. The Vajra bracelet on his hand shattered into a few pieces and fell to the ground. Yu Qianqiu spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. His parents and brother cried out in grief. They didn't care about the danger anymore and they quickly ran over. On the other side, Lu Chongqing seemed to have used up a huge amount of energy to execute such a powerful attack. The green destiny sword shrunk back to its original form with a whoosh. With a nimble flash, it tried to escape. How could Bai Suzhen let it escape? She teleported over and grabbed it with her claw. The strange thing was, no matter how hard it struggled, it couldn't hurt the mountain-piercing claw in Bai Suzhen's hand. From this, it could be seen that the Fox clan's treasure, mountain-piercing claw, was no ordinary treasure. Bai Suzhen immediately cut off the connection between Lu Chongqing and the green destiny sword. She raised the sword in her hand and looked at Lu Chongqing with a frosty expression. Ong Kwangsung's treasure really lives up to its name. With that said, she teleported to Yu Qianqiu's side and asked gently, "How is it?" Yu Qianqiu was half lying in his father's embrace. He looked at his crying mother and panicking brother and he smiled at Bai Suzhen with a pale face. "It's not a big problem. I won't die. If I had known, I would have gone to Utopia to hide. He paused for a moment and a fierce look flashed in his eyes. He said in a cold tone, that old B***starred injured Yun Chong. Sister, we can't let him off. I want his life. Actually, he could have gone to Utopia to hide from the Green Destiny Sword's sharpness. However, it was because he saw that Guan Yu was injured that he acted on impulse. Impulsiveness is the devil. Bai Suzhen smiled gently and nodded in understanding. When she turned around to look at Lu Chongqing, her face was cold again. Although the 300 or so men in black couldn't get close to Lu Zhongqing, they surrounded him to prevent him from escaping. This was the first time the triads had come out in full force just to deal with a single person. In the end, the people under them were fine and the two leaders were severely injured. This was a great humiliation to them. Their eyes were burning with anger, and they wished they could swallow Lu Chongqing alive. They didn't think that the sect leader of Ong Kwangtsung, who was ranked 6th in the orthodox sects, wouldn't have the ability to defend himself. It would be a joke if he could be killed so easily. If that happened, Ong Kwangtsung wouldn't be able to survive in the cultivation world anymore. Lu Chongqing, who was hiding under the protection of the defensive magical treasure, Bai Horsetail Whisk, had already popped an energy recovery pill into his mouth to recover the primordial essence that he had expended. At this moment he was filled with regret. He shouldn't have come to seek revenge on his own. How could he, who had always been smart, be blinded by hatred? Now that the sect treasure of Ong Kwangtsung, the Green Destiny Sword, had been snatched away by someone, even if he returned, how was he going to answer to the ancestors in the back mountain? Snatch it back? That was impossible. Based on the fact that the woman in white could teleport, it meant that she had the cultivation of a late-stage tribulation transcendence stage. It would be good if she could escape, let alone snatch the Green Destiny Sword back. However, this woman looked very familiar, and he couldn't remember when he had seen a woman with such high cultivation. Bai Suzhen, who was dressed in a snow-white dress, had a pair of sharp black claws, which made her look very strange. Her pretty face was as cold as frost, and her killing intent had already been triggered. Step by step she slowly walked toward the surrounded Lu Chongqing. Chapter 182. As Bai Suzhen approached, Lu Chongqing felt immense pressure. That was an expert at the final stage of the tribulation transcendence stage. The horsetail whisk in his hand spun once again. Bai Suzhen added a seal to the Green Destiny Sword and threw it into her storage pouch to prevent it from being contacted by the opponent's divine sense. Then she stared expressionlessly at Lu Chongqing, who was hiding in the horsetail whisk. The graceful white figure suddenly disappeared in front of everyone. When she reappeared, Bai Suzhen was like a white butterfly floating in the air. Her two jade-like arms stretched out, her white clothes fluttered, and the silk ribbons that bound her hair suddenly floated away. Suddenly her fine black hair moved without any wind, flying in all directions. The sharp claws on her hands gradually grew longer, and each of the claws was entwined with black miasma. The 10 sharp claws were more than a meter long. Under the illumination of the flames on the ground, Bai Suzhen looked like a female devil. An expert at the final stage of the tribulation transcendence stage was about to make a move. Lu Chongqing was extremely nervous. He didn't know if the Bai Yi horsetail whisk, which was also one of Ong Kwangtsung's treasures, would be able to block it. Ah! A delicate shout suddenly resounded in the night sky, shaking the surroundings. Bai Suzhen's figure turned and she waved her sharp claws upside down. Suddenly, the black miasma on her 10 claws burst forth, forming a cone-shaped black light, and rushed towards the crazily moving white whiskers. The black and white collided, creating a strong wind pressure that instantly extinguished the raging flames on the ground. Once the wind pressure passed, the high-temperature objects lit up again. Fortunately, there was someone protecting the 4 members of the Yu clan. Otherwise, the 3 ordinary people would have been injured. Pu piu piu piu. The black light rushed in and the countless strands of whiskers immediately tried to wrap around it. Bai Suzhen was trapped within and her 10 claws spread out. The black light that gathered together scattered and stirred up the surroundings. Do. The black light was like a sharp pair of scissors. As long as it touched the whiskers, they would be cut. Not long after, the white silk fluttered in the air and there were not many whiskers left. Lu Chongqing was scared out of his wits. He didn't expect that Ong Kwangsung's treasure to be unable to withstand a single attack from the opponent. He didn't know that the sharp claws on Bai Sujian's hands were the most precious treasures of the Fox clan. Even if an ordinary cultivator wore it, he or she would be able to cut mountains and crack rocks, let alone an expert at the final stage of the crossing calamity stage. If he was also at the end of the tribulation, he might be able to resist for a while. The white horsetail whisk fell into Lu Chongqing's hands, and then came into contact with Bai Sujian. Just like that, this top-notch high-grade defensive artifact was destroyed. It had to be said that it was a pity because in Lu Chongqing's hands, it really wasn't able to display the power it should have. Lu Chongqing's life was at stake, so he couldn't care less about whether it was a pity or not. The handle of the horsetail whisk in his hand shot towards Bai Sujian. He flicked his long sleeves again and 4 purple lights shot towards the 4 corners of his body. Immediately they formed a semicircular purple light curtain, enveloping him within it. Then he released a flying sword to protect his head. The horsetail whisk's handle naturally couldn't hurt Bai Sujian, so it was flicked away by her. She was also very familiar with the purple light curtain that lit up below. It was the purple light demon trapping array that trapped her for nearly 200 years in the forbidden area of Ong Kwangsung. However, how could this thing stop her? But this was Lu Jingguang's last resort. Bai Sujian raised her claw and shot it directly. The purple light curtain rippled and her whole body went through it effortlessly. Lu Chongqing was shocked and his flying sword hurriedly shot over. Dang! Ding! The flying sword was instantly smashed into pieces by the sharp claws. 5 black lights shot out, covering Lu Chongqing's whole body. Lu Chongqing was so scared that his limbs became weak. He wanted to escape, but before he could react, he felt his vision blur and he lost consciousness in an instant. Bai Sujian stretched out her claw and directly took off his head. Looking at her expression, it was as if she had done something trivial. Her bright eyes glanced at the purple light curtain and her other claw waved. The black lights shot directly into the soil and stirred. The purple light curtain collapsed and disappeared. The purple light demon trapping array was forcibly broken by her. In a flash, a white figure appeared beside Yu Qianqiu, and Lu Chongqing's head was thrown at his feet. At this time Yu Qianqiu had already stood up. Apart from his face being a little pale, no other problems could be seen. This was obviously related to the mysterious effect of the golden bead. On the other side, Guan Yu was still lying down. Scoundrel! Little Yu Wuxia ran over and kicked Lu Chongqing's head at his mother's feet. As a result, his own feet hurt and he hugged his feet and jumped around. A head that was still bleeding, especially with its eyes wide open, died with a grievance. How could Xue Ernyang bear to look at this thing? She immediately turned her head to the side and vomited. Yu Changge, on the other hand, let out a deep breath. Today's battle was an eye-opener for him. Only now did he understand that the world his son was in now was not something he could imagine. Yu Qianqiu looked at the figures hiding in the dark, and they were all nearby citizens. He frowned and said, "The commotion here is too big. Maybe Ong Kwangsung will come to find us. We have to leave as soon as possible." He then shouted, "Gather." More than 300 people gathered together as fast as they could. Guan Yu, who was still in a coma, was supported by 2 company commanders. Yu Qianqiu said to Yu Changge, "Father, it's all my fault. I brought trouble to the family. However, we can't stay here for the time being. I have to send you to a safe place." Yu Changge nodded and looked at the Yu residence that had been turned into ruins. This was the family business that he had worked hard for half of his life. He sighed with a little regret. "I understand, but there are still a lot of businesses outside. I originally wanted to leave them to you and your brother, but it seems like I have to give them up now. Where there's life, there's hope. Father, please believe in me. We will definitely have a bigger family business in the future. As for the businesses outside, there's no need to give them up. Why don't we give them to the Yu clan? Just treat it as father's contribution to the family. What do you think?" Yu Qianqiu asked. Although Yu Changge was unwilling, he still nodded in agreement. After all, it was better than throwing them away for nothing. "Sister, bring my mother and brother back to Ethereal Palace first." "I'll be back soon," said Yu Qianqiu. He enveloped the 3 of them with his divine sense and instantly sent them back. Then he sent the 300 over subordinates with him. As his cultivation became more profound, The number of people and things that he could send to Utopia at once also increased. Yu Changre was dumbfounded. After Yu Qiancho was done, he said to him, "Father, I'll go back to the clan with you now to hand over all the businesses in the family." Yu Changre nodded and the father and son left in a hurry. In Ongquangsung, there was a huge bell hanging above the green light hall. It was late at night and the bell suddenly rang 3 times without anyone striking it. The sound reverberated throughout the entire Ongquangsung mountain peak. The entire Ongquangsung was instantly in an uproar. The people who were startled awake flew towards the green light hall. Why did it cause such a huge commotion? It was because this bell was extraordinary. Every generation of Ongquangsung sect leader would use their natal primordial spirit to nurture such a bell and hang it on the main beam of the green light hall. If they stepped down from the position of sect leader, the bell would be destroyed. This bell was connected to the current sect leader's aura. If the sect leader passed away or died in an accident, the bell would ring 3 times as a warning. This was to prevent the sect leader from dying without anyone knowing. And this bell corresponded to Lu Chongqing. It suddenly rang in the middle of the night. It was very ominous. A group of people gathered outside the hall. Suddenly, more than 20 people flew over from the back of the mountain. They flew over everyone's heads and flashed into the green light hall. The dozens of elders inside made way for them when they saw them. They saluted in unison. For a moment the entire green light hall was strangely quiet. No one spoke. They were led by 2 old men. They seemed to be older than the old men behind them. These 2 were called Qing Nu and Qing Fu. They were the only 2 cultivators in the final stage of the tribulation passing stage in Ongquangsung. There were originally 5 of them, but the other 3 had fallen in the battle with the Blood Devil Palace. Qing Nu looked around and asked in a deep voice, "Is Lu Chongqing not in Ongquangsung?" No one answered. In fact, no one knew where the sect leader had gone. Servant Qing cast a spell at the bell, and the body of the bell glowed with a green light. The geography of the Wuxia Empire's mountains and rivers appeared. A white light the size of a fist stopped in a certain spot and gradually dimmed until it disappeared. It was as if it was telling the people below, "I'm leaving. Farewell forever." What did that white light represent? Everyone was well aware that sect leader Lu Chongqing had really died. Qing Fu stared at the large bell. His face was as gloomy as still water. He turned around and said to Qing Nu, "Senior apprentice brother, it's Swallow City." Huh. One of the elders cried out in surprise. Qing Fu turned around and said, "Do you know something?" Everyone looked at that elder. That elder was one of the people who had brought in Wu Baoru and the others yesterday. His name was Mu Yun. "Greetings, old ancestor." Mu Yun walked out and saluted. He looked a bit hesitant. He didn't know if he should say some things. It should be known that the sect leader's death was a big deal. If he spoke carelessly there would be big problems. Qing Fu frowned and said, "Just say what you know. No one will hold you responsible." "Yes." With Qing Fu's guarantee, Mu Yun thought for a while and said, "Yesterday when junior brother and I brought the bodies of Lu Jingguang and the others, sect leader insisted that it was Yu Qiancho who did it. I remember when sect leader brought Yu Qiancho to Ongquangsung, he said that Yu Qiancho was from Swallow City. Could sect leader be the disciple who joined supporting Immortal Island and beat up Lu Jingguang in the 100 Flowers Valley?" Qing Fu asked. Mu Yun nodded and said, "Yes." At the side, Qing Nu looked around and sneered. "A bunch of bastards who only know how to seek small benefits and don't pursue the great Tao." From the sect master to the elders, from the top to the bottom, they forcefully forced our sect's disciples into other sections. I heard that disciple is very talented. In less than 10 years his cultivation has already broken through to the core formation stage. If he is given another few decades, there will be another rising star in the cultivation world. Such an excellent disciple, I Ongquangsung can't accept him. Where is the justice in the world? If this continues, Ongquangsung will be destroyed by your hands sooner or later. I am so angry. Senior brother, now is not the time to talk about this. The key is to find the 2 sect-guarding magic treasures of our sect. Stay here and guard. I will bring some people to take a look. Qing Fu comforted him. He looked at the crowd and frowned, saying, 10 people who live in the back mountain, come with me. He took the lead and flew out of the green light hall. 10 people followed him. The so-called People who live in the back mountain were the seniors who lived in the tribulation passing stage and above in the back mountain of Ongquangsung. The 11 people flew quickly in the air. With their flying speed, it only took a few hours to travel from Ongquangsung to Swallow City. Normally, cultivators below the original infant stage needed to fly on their swords. Once they reached the original infant stage, they could fly in the air. It was flying, not flying. The speed was far slower than flying. Usually, original infant cultivators could still fly on their swords. Only those who reached the tribulation passing stage could fly for a long time without relying on magic treasures like flying swords. Those who reached the end of the tribulation passing stage were naturally even more powerful. They could even teleport within short distances. After flying like the wind and lightning for a few hours, it was already dawn. The 11 people arrived at Swallow City. They stood in the air and looked down. There was still a fire in a big house in the city. Thick smoke rolled up and was very conspicuous. Many people were outside carrying water to put out the fire to prevent the surrounding houses from being affected. Qing Fu pointed at that place and shouted, "Go down." The 11 shadows shot into the middle of the ruins. Their speed was naturally not something that the mortals outside could see. Soon they found Lu Zhongqing, who was beheaded. Qing Fu only glanced at them. When a person walked over with a bare horsetail whisk, Qing Fu's brows furrowed deeply. The white horsetail whisk's value lay in its whisk. Without the whisk, could it still be considered a magic treasure? In the end, the group of people spread out to search, but they couldn't find the whereabouts of the Green Destiny sword. Look carefully again. Qing Fu ordered everyone and looked around. When the house was intact, it was obviously not small. It was not an ordinary house. He teleported to the street outside and walked out from a secluded place. There were a few elders standing on the side of the street. They were obviously old and couldn't help fight the fire like young people. Qing Fu walked over and cupped his hands at one of the elders. He smiled and said, "Old friend, whose house is this? How did it burn like this?" The elder returned the greeting and looked Qing Fu up and down. He said, "Old brother, you're not a local, are you? Otherwise, how could you not know the richest family in this city, the Yu clan? This is my first time here. However, I have long heard of the name of the richest family in Swallow City." Qing Fu looked at the house where the fire was already under control and asked, "This is the Yu clan?" "Who said it wasn't?" "Zai. The Yu clan has always been kind and charitable. I didn't think they would encounter such a disaster. I heard that last night." The elder turned around and was instantly stunned. There was clearly an old man talking to him just now. How did he disappear in the blink of an eye? Could it be that his eyes were playing tricks on him? The elder rubbed his eyes hard. Returning to the ruins, everyone gathered around, indicating that they still couldn't find him. Qing Fu nodded and looked around at the ruins. He pondered for a moment and slowly said, "Let's go back." The 11 people immediately rushed into the sky. Chapter 183. After settling the matter, Yu Qianchou brought his father back to Utopia's ethereal palace. Yu Changre was speechless. In the blink of an eye, they had arrived at another place, which was a little hard for him to accept. However, after thinking about it, he felt relieved. His son was no longer immortal. The palace-like building in front of him shocked him even more. Furthermore, it was built on the top of a mountain. How much manpower and money must have been spent to build this? The cold stars shone in the sky. Standing at the top of the mountain, he felt like he could pluck the stars with his hands. He did not dare to speak loudly. "Father, come in." Yu Qianchou saw his father standing outside the palace in a daze and could not help but call out. "What is this place?" Yu Changre asked. Yu Qianchou scratched his head and said with a smile, "Of course it's my territory. You can live here without worry." Yu Changre nodded and walked in with his son with a stomach full of doubts. As soon as they entered, they saw Wuxia running around happily and touching everywhere. The glowing crystals embedded in the walls were especially attractive to him. Seeing that his father and brother had arrived, Wuxia ran over and pulled his father. He said in surprise, "Father, look, there are glowing stones everywhere." He did not pay attention to his youngest son's words and casually replied. Along the way, he saw beautiful women everywhere. There was not a single man, which made him feel a little strange. Could it be that his son was the only man in the entire palace? Bai Suzhen had already ordered people to arrange the rooms for this family. At this moment she was chatting with Shui Ernyang. Shui Ernyang was holding her hand and laughing non-stop. Her eyes were full of little stars. The family of four finally met in the ethereal palace. Yu Qianzhou heaved a sigh of relief. He looked around and seemed to feel that something was missing. After thinking for a while, he secretly felt that something was wrong. He immediately disappeared from the palace in a flash and appeared directly on the roof of the ethereal palace. A graceful figure was leaning on the railing. Her shoulders were shaking non-stop, and one could faintly hear the sound of sobbing. Yu Qianzhou didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It seemed that he was angry and couldn't control his emotions. He seemed to have pushed Chu Ping'er and said something rather provocative. Women were very sensitive creatures. Sometimes, a wrong word could make her imagination run wild. Not to mention that his words and actions were so hurtful. This was really a terrible thing. But at the same time women were easy to coax. He didn't know if he could fool her. Why are you crying? Yu Qianzhou's tone was filled with surprise. He walked over and hugged her from behind. He lowered his body and asked, "Baby, what's wrong? Who bullied you? Don't touch me." Chu Ping'er pushed him away and walked to the side, not even looking at him. "Damn it, did those maidservants downstairs bully you? Just you wait, I'll kill them all right now to appease your anger." He spoke as if he had a deep grudge against someone, as if he really wanted to kill someone. "Shameless. You were the one who—" She turned around and saw a pool of blood on Yu Qianzhou's chest. She couldn't continue her sentence. But her pretty face was wet. It was obvious that she had just washed it with her tears. Yu Qianzhou ran over and said with a smile, Look. I'm back to the feeling of being scolded by you when I peeped at you bathing in Ongquangsung." Chu Ping'er was so angry that her body trembled. She gritted her teeth and spat out the word shameless again. "Hehe. Scold me all you want. As long as it can appease your anger, I don't mind if you kill me." Yu Qianzhou bowed and said. Chu Ping'er turned around and didn't look at him anymore. This man's previous actions hurt her too much. It was as if she was just his plaything, a dispensable plaything. "Ping'er, don't be angry. I was impulsive just now. I don't want to listen to your explanation. Let me go. I want to go back to Ongquangsung. From today onwards we'll pretend that nothing happened between us." Chu Ping'er's words were resolute, leaving no room for negotiation. "Ping'er, listen to my explanation." I don't want to listen." Chu Ping'er covered her ears with both hands and screamed. Her voice pierced through the night sky, causing many people to run out of Misty Palace to look at the top of the palace. Bai Suzhen teleported to the top and stood not far from the two of them. Not long after, the Yu family of three also arrived at the top of the stairs. Yu Qianzhou was stunned. After a long time he sighed and said, "Looks like you've made up your mind to leave this place and leave me." "Yes," Chu Ping'er said without hesitation. She was indeed heartbroken. "There's no room for negotiation?" "No." Yu Qianzhou nodded sadly and said, "All right. I won't force you." He took a deep breath and sighed. "We met in Ongquangsung, but now we're going to be separated in Misty Palace. We were clearly in love, but why did we end up like this? It's all my fault. Back when we were in Ongquangsung, you asked me when you'd be able to hear my music again. I've always kept that in mind. Now that you're leaving, I'll treat it as a song for you and for me. Let me remember this day." There was a stone platform at the top of Misty Palace that was a few meters tall. It was inlaid with fluorescent stones. This was the zither platform that Yu Qianzhou had specially built for Bai Suzhen. He turned around resolutely with a desolate look on his face and leaped onto the platform. He summoned a zither out of thin air and sat down dejectedly. The night breeze blew and the sky turned white. The women downstairs looked up, wondering why he was so depressed tonight. His 10 fingers plucked the strings bit by bit, and the sorrowful sound of the zither rang along with the breeze. It made one's heart wrench slightly. Yu Qianzhou's voice was a little hoarse as he sang. "This time I've really decided to leave. I want to distance myself from those sorrows that I haven't understood for a long time. I want you to forget about your worries and care, to let go of all the distractions and be free. That time, it was your unintentional departure that became my unchanging sorrow. Thus I became indifferent to prosperity and could no longer be happy. Thus I guarded the loneliness and could not return." After he finished singing, The zither continued to play along with Yu Qianzhou's fingers. Everyone in Misty Palace was moved. Chu Ping suddenly turned around and looked at him, her eyes blurred. Bai Suzhen sighed and looked at Chu Ping. How could you bear to leave such a man? Mother, who's leaving brother? Brother is so pitiful. Little Wu Chou pulled her mother's hand and looked at her pitifully. Shui Ernyang, on the other hand, had tears in her eyes. She leaned her head on Yu Changgui's shoulder and sobbed softly. Yu Changgui looked at Chu Ping, looked at Bai Suzhen, and then looked at Yu Qianzhou. His face twitched as he thought to himself, as expected of my son. The pupil has surpassed the teacher. But when did this brat learn to play this trick? There was a saying that women were the easiest to see through other women's pretense, and men were the easiest to see through men's pretentious looks. The saying was right. Yu Qianzhou's crooked thoughts were seen through by a certain someone. Yu Qianzhou smiled bitterly and continued singing, "This time I've really decided to leave. I want to distance myself from those sorrows that I haven't understood for a long time. I want you to forget your worries and care, to let go of all these worries and be free. That time, it was your unintentional departure that became my unchanging sorrow. Thus I became indifferent to prosperity and could no longer be happy. Thus I guarded the loneliness and could not return. You can pick the falling afterglow. Keep the moment forever for you. Women were the easiest to feel emotional." At this moment, many of the women downstairs were already crying uncontrollably. They even tried their best to cover their mouths to prevent themselves from crying. Some of them wanted to know who had made the Lord of Utopia so sad that he actually sang such a sorrowful song. As for the culprit, her face was already covered in tears when she recalled the past. She knew that this song was sung for her. It was sung for her. That time, it was your unintentional departure that became my unchanging sorrow. Thus I became indifferent to prosperity and was only happy for you. I wanted to accompany you to distance yourself from loneliness and be free. The song gradually stopped. The sound of the zither was accompanied by a gentle breeze that caressed the disappointed and dazed face on the stage. It gradually became sparse, dim, distant, and dissipated. Chapter 184. Yu Changgui looked around and smiled. He held little Wu Chou with one hand and his wife, who was sobbing softly, with the other. He said, "This is their own business. We don't need to worry about it." Then he led the mother and son away from the stage. Before he left, he glanced at his eldest son meaningfully. Bai Suzhen also left the stage quietly. Yu Qianzhou put away his zither and jumped down from the stage. He walked to Chu Ping and stretched out his hand. He sighed and said, "Give me your hand. I will walk you out." Hearing this, Chu Ping came back to her senses. She bit her lips and hesitated for a long time. However, she did not stretch out her hand. Yu Qianzhou, on the other hand, calmly waited with his hand outstretched. "Are you hurt?" Chu Ping stared at the blood stain on his chest and asked suddenly. Yu Qianzhou withdrew his hand and patted his chest. He looked at her with a faint smile and said, "It's nothing. I just spat out 2 mouthfuls of blood." Chu Pinger's eyes flickered. She deliberately avoided Yu Qianzhou's gaze. She bit her lips and said, "You left in a hurry just now. Did you have something important to do? Why, are you willing to listen to my explanation?" Yu Qianzhou did not ask any more questions. He did not want to make her feel awkward. Otherwise, if he annoyed her, his show just now would have been in vain. He changed the topic and explained, "Ong Kwangsung sect master Lu Chongqing wanted to take revenge on me. He found my family in the secular world. Fortunately, I went back in time. Otherwise, I would never see my parents again." Sect master? Chu Pinga was surprised. She finally understood why Yu Qianzhou was so angry. No one could ignore the safety of his parents. However, she still felt a little wronged. "As soon as we met, we naturally fought." Yu Qianzhou smiled and snorted. "I'm afraid the Blue Light School will have to change its leader now." What did you do to the sect leader?" "Ong Kwangsung can't let a dead man be the sect leader, right?" "You killed the sect leader." Chu Pinger's face was filled with shock. She had always been a member of the Ong Kwangsung sect. It was hard for her to accept that the sect leader was killed by her own man. Yu Qianzhou looked at her and smiled. "I can see that your anger has subsided. There's a saying in the secular world, if you marry a chicken, follow the chicken. If you marry a dog, follow the dog. Now that you're my woman, I don't want Tsung to be more important than me in your heart. Forget it. As for your master, I will bring her here as soon as possible. You should believe that I will do what I promised you. Right now there's something very important. My parents are also in the ethereal palace. As their daughter-in-law, are you not going to pay them a visit? Meet your parents. Your parents are here too? Chu Ping'er did not know where to put her hands and feet. She was completely flustered. She could only blame herself for not paying attention. Otherwise she would have seen it. At this moment, Tsung and Master, as well as the grievances she had suffered, were all thrown to the back of her mind. Her expression was filled with anxiety. Easy done. Yu Qianzhou smiled slyly and grabbed her hand, dragging her down. An ugly daughter-in-law has to meet her parents-in-law. Let's go. Am I ugly now? Wait, look at my face and see if my hair is messed up. Let me change my clothes first. Don't drag me down. Please let me tidy up first. Chu Ping'er was so scared that she screamed and struggled. Yu Qianzhou could not be bothered with her. He picked her up by the waist and carried her down on his shoulder. What happened next was quite exciting. After the introductions, Chu Ping'er stood in front of Yu Qianzhou's parents. Little Wu Chou stared at this sister-in-law with her eyes wide open. Yu Qianzhou did not join them. He walked out of the palace with Bai Suzhen. The two of them stood at the edge of the cliff, enjoying the coolness of the dawn. They looked at the starry sky that was about to fade away. Yu Qianzhou enjoyed this feeling very much. When he was alone with Bai Suzhen, his heart was always so calm, peaceful and worry-free. Are you all right? Bai Suzhen pulled up a strand of hair that was messed up by the mountain wind and asked calmly. Looking at the sky quietly, Yu Qianzhou shook his head and said, I think I'm all right. I've coaxed you and comforted you. I can't do anything if you keep tormenting me. This time I really decided to leave. I want to stay away from the sorrow that I haven't understood for a long time. I want you to forget the sorrow and care, to let go of all the troubles and be free. Bai Suzhen looked at the sky with him with gentle eyes and opened her red lips slightly, singing softly. She had a good memory. She could always repeat the song word by word after listening to it. She also sang it very well, which was quite charming when it came out of her mouth. Yu Qianzhou could not help singing softly with her. That time, you left inadvertently, which became my unchanging sorrow for a long time. Therefore I became indifferent to prosperity and could no longer be happy. Therefore I could not return to loneliness. After the song was finished, the two of them fell silent again. After a while, Bai Suzhen took out the green destiny sword from her storage bag and said, I have wiped away all the divine senses in this green destiny sword. Although such a dharma treasure cannot be compared to a spiritual treasure, it still has some spirituality. You can inject your divine senses into it and become its owner. With more communication, you should be able to understand its effects. It will be helpful for you when you travel outside in the future. Yu Qianzhou took over the green destiny sword and examined it carefully. The body of the sword was blue and cold. There were exquisite patterns on it, and the blade was shining with a cold glow. It was abnormally sharp. He could refine some ordinary dharma treasures now, but he did not know how such a dharma treasure was refined. A wisp of divine senses was slowly injected into the body of the sword. Suddenly, a faintly discernible mysterious force gushed out from nowhere, as though it was rejecting the injection of Yu Qianzhou's divine senses. Yu Qianzhou's divine senses exerted a little force and immediately broke through that rejecting force. His divine senses flowed into the body of the sword, and he instantly understood the structure of the body of the sword. Now was not the time to understand it. The sky was already bright and it was almost time to meet up with Bai Zitsong and the rest. After keeping the green destiny sword in his storage bag, Yu Qianzhou said, Sister, I'm going to take a look at the 4 major clans. I'm not sure if it's convenient for me to come back any time. I'll have to trouble you to take care of my family and Chu Ping'er. Are we leaving now? Let's go check on Guan Yu's injuries first. Then I'll go to Qin Feng's place to retrieve 100 flying swords. The original ones were destroyed by Lu Chongqing. You should inform Chu Ping'er and your parents first. Yu Qianzhou pondered for a while and said, I won't. It's fine as long as you know. If they ask, just explain it to them. I got it. Yu Qianzhou looked at Bai Suzhen and smiled. seeing a strand of her hair fluttering in the wind, he stretched out his hand and gently tucked it behind her ear. She looked at the sky indifferently and let him do whatever he wanted. He teleported to Guan Yu's room in the military camp. Guan Yu was sitting cross-legged to treat his injuries while the 3 company commanders were guarding by the side. When they saw Yu Qianqiu, they wanted to greet Guan Yu, but he waved his hand to stop them, indicating that they should not disturb Guan Yu. He then gestured to ask how Guan Yu was doing. One of the company commanders waved his hand to indicate that it was not a big problem. Yu Qianqiu nodded. In front of them, he changed his blood-stained clothes and left with a peace of mind. When he came to the bottom of the valley, it had become Manager Qin Feng's territory. As for the treasures that were originally stored here, they had all been transferred to the secret chamber when the ethereal palace was built. The entrance to the secret chamber was in Bai Suzhen's room. Other than Yu Qianqiu and Bai Suzhen, no one else could enter. At this time, Qin Feng was engrossed in alchemy. Looking at his sloppy appearance, he looked quite formidable. Yu Qianqiu thought about it and decided not to disturb him. After ordering 2 people to bring 100 flying swords, he appeared again in his own room in the Cultivation Alliance. When he said goodbye to Quan Deming, he naturally had to accept some reminders from the other party. Yu Qianqiu also put on a look of humility and acceptance. After he came out, he walked directly to the Bai clan's shop. Bai Zitsong and the other 3 were already waiting for him. The 5 of them left the 100 Flowers Valley. Bai Zitsong released a flying instrument and carried them away. Chapter 185. The 4 great families in the cultivation world did not accept disciples as widely as other sections. Instead, they had been in the cultivation world for many years in the way of the family. They neither regarded themselves as righteous nor as demonic. In this cultivation world, which was clearly divided, one had to say that they were different. The Bai, Jing, Wu, and Tan clans were established with formations. For example, the hidden secret pavilion in the 100 Flowers Valley was opened by the Tan clan. Most of the storage bags used by the hidden secret pavilion were from the hidden secret pavilion. Storage bags weren't something ordinary people could make. Without profound formation knowledge, it was impossible to even think about it. The Wu clan was established with their auction house. This was a business that was built on their reputation. Everyone in the cultivation world knew that the Wu clan's eyes for appraising items weren't ordinary. Everything that was auctioned by the Wu clan wasn't fake. At least it was like that for now. As long as people had money, they could buy anything they liked without worry. With such a good reputation, the Wu clan's auction house naturally had a monopoly position. However, the commission they took was relatively high. The Jing clan was established with blacksmithing. In the entire cultivation world, there probably wasn't any sect that could surpass the Jing clan in blacksmithing, including the supporting Immortal Island. The flying artifacts that the various sects used were almost all from the Jing clan. Although it wasn't considered a magic treasure and only had a simple function of enlarging or shrinking, it was impossible without profound blacksmithing skills. This kind of seemingly simple artifact was something that the various sects couldn't make. The Bai clan was a rather mysterious clan. They rarely moved around outside. The few shops they had were all selling insignificant items. It was similar to a shop that sold goods. However, this low-profile clan was willingly led by the other 3 major clans. They were the number 1 clan among the 4 major clans. There was a legend that the 4 major clans were originally one clan. The Jing, Wu, and Tan clans were the servants of the Bai clan. However, they separated from the Bai clan and became the 4 major clans. That was why the 3 clans were still led by the Bai clan. Yu Qianqiu naturally heard about this. Right now, there was still half a day before they arrived at the Wu clan. He was a bit bored on the flying artifact, so he asked about this topic. Zitsong, rumor has it that your 4 great families were originally one family. Is that true? Yu Qianqiu asked curiously. Hearing that, Wu Liqing, who was controlling the flying instrument, turned around and exchanged glances with the other 3. Bai Zitsong shook his head and said, "Whether this rumor is true or not, let alone you, even the 4 of us don't know. Whether it's true or not, I'm afraid that only the elders and the elders of the 4 families know." Oh. Yu Qianqiu asked curiously, "Aren't the 4 of you the first successors of the 4 great clans? How could you not know about it?" Yes, he is the first successor, but he is only the first successor, not the only successor. Bai Zitsong smiled bitterly and said, in every generation each of our 4 families has 4 successors, and there are more than 1 or 2 of the first successors who can't successfully become the head of the family. This will only be known when the head of the family retires. It's still too early now. Until the end, who knows what changes will happen. Hee hee, for heirs, I'm afraid the competition will be a little intense. Yu Qianzhou smiled and did not say anything more. Whenever such a situation occurred, the story behind it was usually more exciting. I know. Jing Zhuo, who was at the side, looked outside and said in a daze. The other 3 also had bitter smiles on their faces. Yu Qianzhou tactfully stopped asking questions. He stood up and looked at the flowing clouds receding rapidly. The world below would change from time to time and the scenery would often change. It was not too tiresome to look at. The Wu clan was located in a remote and deep mountain, and the people who interacted with this clan were all high-ranking cultivators. If it was in the secular world, it would be too shocking. Most of the other cultivation sects were like this, as they wouldn't disturb each other with the people of the secular world. The flying artifact slowed down and flew at a low altitude. After passing through a dense primeval forest, the view before him suddenly opened up. A large manor that was connected together appeared in front of him. Behind the manor was a huge waterfall. The flowing water split into 2 along the river, circling around the manor on both sides, and then converging to form a river from the other side into the distance. It was Yu Qianzhou's first time seeing such a huge manor. The buildings inside were extraordinary, and it was needless to guess that the Wu clan of the 4 major clans had arrived. When they were flying in the sky, they could see that the entire manor was shaped like an egg, and there was a small river connecting the 2 sides of the river, separating one side of the egg. Tan Fei pointed at the place that was separated like a hat and said, that is the place where the Wu clan holds their auctions, and it is also a place for people to rest. This side of the river is where the Wu clan lives, and ordinary people are not allowed to cross this river. Yu Qianzhou nodded. It seemed like these people came here often and they were very familiar with this place. The flying artifact suddenly stopped in midair, and Wu Liqing took out a jade archive, which shot a white light into a tall tower in front of them. Yu Qianzhou looked around and saw that there were more than a dozen similar towers. After the person on the tower waved his hand in approval, Wu Liqing controlled the flying artifact to descend, and landed in a courtyard. The few of them jumped down and the artifact was stored away. Yu Qianzhou was looking around and suddenly, a white light shot out from behind the rockery, aiming straight for his head. F***ck. Yu Qianzhou let out a strange cry and jumped to the side. He pointed his finger and 12 white lights immediately flashed out from his storage pouch. One of them struck down the flying sword, 6 of them protected his body, and the remaining 5 shot straight at the rockery. Brother Yu, please have mercy. Wu Liqing shouted, but it was too late. Rumble. 5 cold lights flashed and the rockery was smashed into pieces. Behind the rockery, a young girl stood dumbstruck and had nowhere to hide, because 5 bright flying swords were pointed at her. Gentlemen, what is the meaning of this? Yu Qianzhou shouted coldly, and the flying sword that struck down the white light was pressed against the young girl's neck, as if it would kill her on the spot if she was displeased. The 6 flying swords that protected her were meant to guard against the remaining 4 people. This was the first time the 4 of them had seen Yu Qianzhou in action, and he was able to control 12 flying swords at the same time. Not only was he able to deal with one, he was also able to guard against the remaining 4 at the same time. To be able to attract the attention of both the righteous and Devil Dao, he was indeed extraordinary. Bai Zitsong waved his hand and smiled bitterly. Brother Yu, please don't misunderstand. This is Yu Qianzhou's sister, and she has always been mischievous and likes to play tricks on people. Even the 3 of us were not spared when we first came here. Is that so? Yu Qianzhou looked around vigilantly to see if there were any other ambushes. Of course, no one would dare to be careless when ambushed. This was a matter of life and death. Wu Liqing cupped his hands and said, Brother Yu, please be merciful. This is really my sister Wu Lixue. She definitely has no intention of harming Brother Yu. Please let her go. The others also followed suit. At this time, a dozen people flashed by, obviously startled by the commotion here. The leader was a middle-aged couple, the man was tall and handsome and the woman was dignified. When they saw the scene in the courtyard, they were shocked. Wu Liqing walked over and greeted, "Father, Mother." Bai Zitsong and the other two also greeted, "Uncle, Auntie." The man waved his hand at them and looked at Yu Qianqiu and said, "Could this be Fuxian Island's Yu Qianqiu? Liqing, what is going on?" Wu Liqing smiled bitterly and told the whole story. The couple didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and the dozen people around them looked at each other and lowered their weapons. Who knew that the young girl would start crying and said, "Father, Mother, quickly save Shui Air, he wants to kill me." Sob sob. Chapter 186. Yu Qianqiu was not an idiot. Although he was shocked just now, he could tell from everyone's conversation that this girl was from a big family and had never suffered any losses. She was a spoiled girl. However, her appearance and figure were really good. Even when she was crying, she was still so beautiful. Especially under the threat of Chu Yang's flying sword, her tall and slender figure stood straight. That was not an ordinary kind of good. She had a curvaceous figure and long legs. She could compete with Chu Pinger, but it was a completely different style. The flying sword returned to her side, and 12 cold lights danced around her body. With a xiao sound, they all went into the storage bag. The girl immediately ran to everyone's side and threw herself into her mother's arms, crying. It was probably the first time she experienced what it meant to be on the verge of death. She was really scared. She ran past Yu Qianqiu, and Yu Qianqiu experienced what it meant to be a turbulent wave. That trembling could not even be tied up. In order to maintain his demeanor, he forcibly controlled his gaze. The young woman's name was Zhou Xian, and she was constantly comforting her daughter. The man's name was Wu Huagan, and he shouted, "Why are you crying? You clearly know that it's a guest. How can you be like this?" Wu Lixue raised her head and wiped away her tears. She explained, "Who told you to say that Yu Qianqiu is so powerful? I just wanted to see how powerful he is. Do you know now? If he didn't show mercy, you would have lost your life." The man shouted sternly. Hearing this, Wu Lixue shuddered and did not say anything else. She sneaked a glance at Yu Qianqiu and a sliver of fear appeared on her face. No one had ever treated her like this before. If it were not for her brother's warning, Yu Qianqiu might have killed her. Wu Liqing shook his head and smiled bitterly. He said, "Father, Mother, this is the Yu Qianqiu that I told you about." He then introduced them to Yu Qianqiu. "Brother Yu, this is my father and mother." Things were clear now. Yu Qianqiu didn't want to pursue the matter further. He walked over and bowed. "Yu Qianqiu greets uncle and auntie. I was too impulsive just now." "It's none of your business. Anyone who encounters such a thing would be the same. This girl has been spoiled too much." Wu Huagan waved his hand and clicked his tongue. Supporting Immortal Island is indeed the world's #1 sect. Their disciples are truly extraordinary. This is the first time I've seen someone controlling 12 flying swords at the same time. Legend has it that in ancient times, there was a myriad swords devil monarch who could control tens of thousands of flying swords at the same time. I didn't expect the supporting Immortal Island to have such a mystical sword art. This is truly an eye-opener. Hey, the supporting Immortal Island does have it, but it's all fake. It looks good, but it's useless. Is this the real deal? Yu Qianqiu replied humbly, "You flatter me, uncle. Right, it's over. Liqing, take care of the guests on behalf of the Wu clan. We won't disturb you anymore," Wu Huagan said to his son and led everyone away. Zhou Xian suddenly realized that his daughter was still in a daze and asked curiously, "Shui, aren't you leaving?" Wu Lixue hesitated for a while and said timidly, "Shui, made a mistake just now. I want to accompany the guests with my brother as an apology." Everyone looked at each other and felt as if the sun had risen from the west. Wu Huagan smiled, "Let her be. Let's go." Zhou Xian frowned and glanced at Yu Qianqiu before following her husband and the rest out of the courtyard. After everyone left, Wu Liqing looked at Wu Lixue with a troubled expression and said, "Why are you staying?" Wu Lixue glared and shouted, "Father has already agreed, it's none of your business." Then, as if she thought of something, she glanced at Yu Qianqiu and lowered her voice, "You don't have to care about me, I'll just follow you." Yu Qianqiu was overjoyed. It was good to have a beauty accompanying him. Moreover, it was a hot girl. The waves were surging. Wu Liqing couldn't be bothered with his sister and smiled at Yu Qianqiu. "Brother Yu, I'm sorry about what happened just now. Oh yes, this courtyard is for you to rest. Zitsong and the rest stay here every time they come. Go in and see if you're satisfied. If not, you can change. Yu Qianzhou looked around. The environment was elegant and the main hall had the words Quiet Guest House written on it. There was nothing bad about it, so he smiled and said, It's fine, how can the place Zitsong and the rest stay be bad? Moreover, I'm not a picky person. Why don't you bring me around your Wu clan? I've heard of it for a long time. This. Wu Liqing was a little troubled and said, Brother Yu, to tell you the truth, our family has a rule that outsiders are not allowed to enter many places without the permission of the parents or the Elders Guild. If you want to go around, you can only go to the Hat Island, that specializes in auctions. Yu Qianzhou was stunned, then he smiled and said, I understand, it's the same for Fuxian Island. Why don't we go to Hat Island, for a walk? What do you think? Hey Brother Yu, please. Wu Liqing walked with him and said, Brother Yu, you don't know, this is the place where the families live and cultivate, there's nothing to see. For our Wu family, Hat Island is actually a more interesting place. Usually we can't even go there without permission. The five of them walked in front. Wu Lixue fell a few meters behind and followed them obediently without saying a word. Bai Zitsong and the other two turned around and looked at each other. They had a tacit understanding and smiled at each other. They had already experienced this girl's craziness. Sometimes it was really annoying. However, they didn't want to teach her a lesson for the sake of the four great clans. Now she had been messed with by Yu Qianzhou. Along the way they met many people who greeted Wu Liqing and some nodded at Bai Zitsong and the other two. Obviously the three of them were also regular customers here. When the passers-by saw Wu Lixue behind them, they felt a little strange. Why was this girl so obedient today? Did she change? Yu Qianzhou looked around. Indeed, as Wu Liqing said, there was nothing strange. However, this was probably the core area of the Wu family. The Wu family's area was really big. They walked for about an hour before they reached the bridge by the river. The sky was already getting dark, but when they looked back there weren't many changes. On the other side of the river, Hat Island was already brightly lit and it looked lively. When they crossed the bridge they were questioned by the guard. After knowing that Wu Liqing was here to greet guests, they were allowed to go after registering. It seemed like the Wu family was really strict with their own disciples. It was also at this time that Wu Lixue followed closely behind them. Obviously, she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to cross alone. After crossing the bridge, Yu Qianzhou looked at the bright lights before him. He did not dare to believe that such a place would appear in the depths of the mountains. There were people coming and going, and judging by their clothes, there were people from the righteous and demonic sections. Yu Qianzhou smiled and said, Brother Wu, before I came, Elder Quan told me that there is a shop of our supporting Immortal's island here. He asked me to come and greet them so that the sect can be at ease. I'm not familiar with this place, so I hope Brother Wu can lead me to the shop of supporting Immortal's island. Follow me. Wu Liqing said as they walked. Not only is there a shop of supporting Immortal's island here, but there are also shops of all the major sections. Although it isn't as good as the 100 Flowers Valley, it isn't much worse. After finding the shop of supporting Immortal's island, Yu Qianzhou went in and reported his identity. The shop was managed by a late-stage nascent soul disciple from the Secular Objects Hall. He claimed that he had already received news from the sect and that the sect master had personally passed a message for him to be more careful outside. At the same time, he said that he would inform the sect of his arrival as soon as possible. Yu Qianzhou thanked him and left. However, he found it strange that the sect master of supporting Immortal's island was concerned about him personally. When Bai Zitsong and the other three who were accompanying him heard this, they were speechless. What exactly was the background of this Yu Qianzhou? It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the number of core formation realm disciples in supporting Immortal's island was as many as the hairs on a cow. However, the sect master of the world's #1 sect had such an honorable identity, yet he was concerned about him at all times. It was simply unbelievable. After strolling for quite a while, they saw that the crowded places weren't far away. Yu Qianzhou asked curiously, Brother Wu, I think this place is much livelier than the 100 Flowers Valley. Why are you saying that it isn't as good as the 100 Flowers Valley? Wu Liqing said with a smile, the 100 Flowers Valley has a deep background. At the same time, it has the support of supporting Immortal's island and the 10,000 demons. There really isn't a second good trading place in the cultivation world. You can see so many people now because tomorrow is the grandest auction in the cultivation world that happens once every 5 years. That's why there are so many people here. Once the festive period is over, it will naturally be much quieter. It can't be compared to the 100 Flowers Valley. Yu Qianchou said with a smile. If the 100 Flowers Valley also starts to hold auctions, wouldn't it steal your Wu clan's business? Wu Liqing smiled but didn't answer. Bai Zitsong snorted and said, the 100 Flowers Valley already has the support of the righteous and devil sects. It is already very conspicuous. If they also steal the business of the 4 major clans, I'm afraid they will become too popular and make everyone jealous. When that time comes, no one will be able to protect them. Yu Qianchou thought about it and agreed. It was good to be the richest person in the world, but it wouldn't be good if all the poor people in the world had their eyes on you. You would be in danger of being divided up at any time. After going around many places, Wu Lixue followed behind them and looked around in high spirits. There were too many people and there were a few times when she almost lost them. This might be the reason why she didn't come out too often. However, because her appearance was too outstanding, she had already attracted many people's attention. It was better for the Righteous Path's disciples as they had to consider their status even if they wanted to take a look. Some of the Evil Path's disciples were used to acting casually and were sizing her up without any restraint. Their eyes lingered on her protruding body and almost touched it. If she wasn't wearing the Wu clan's attire and this was the Wu clan's territory, something might have happened. Bai Zitsong and the others were frowning, but they didn't want to spoil Yu Qianchou's interest since it was his first time here. They intentionally slowed down their pace and tried not to get too far away from Wu Lixue. Yu Qianchou finally noticed it too. He laughed and said, Brother Wu, I love good food. Are there any good restaurants around here? Can you bring me there to have a taste? Wu Liqing was happy to see this. He pointed at a magnificent restaurant in front of him and said, that Gulu house is owned by my Wu family. It can barely be considered the best restaurant in this area. The food and wine are also good. Brother Yu, why don't you go there and have a seat? Yu Qianchou had already seen that 3-story restaurant, so he said it on purpose. He nodded and smiled. It's built by the river and the water is murmuring. Muru residence? Interesting. Let's go there. They went in. Wu Liqing was familiar with this place, so he asked for a good private room. When they climbed to the 3rd floor, a few people came down. The leader was surprised and said, Brother Yu Ha, why are you guys here? Yu Qianchou took a look. It was none other than Yan Zhuixing from the 100 Flowers Valley. He cupped his hands and said, Brother Yan, why are you here too? Bai Zitsong and the other 3 also cupped their hands. Although they did not like him, they could not pretend not to know him since they had eaten his food. Haha. I'm here for the auction tomorrow. Are you guys going to the private room upstairs? Yan Zhuixing smiled. He glanced at Wu Lixue behind them and was slightly stunned. It was not his fault. Wu Lixue's body was too hot. Any man would not be a man if he did not take a few more glances at her. But that was often the case. Once people had a prejudice against someone, even the smallest flaws would be magnified infinitely. His actions were nothing in the eyes of Bai Zitsong and the other 3. That's right. Yu Qianchou looked around and smiled. The sky has just turned dark and Brother Yan is already full? Oh no. Yan Zhuixing came back to his senses and smiled. The private room upstairs is too boring. On the contrary, the lobby downstairs is wide open. It's nice to be able to drink with water. I've asked the waiter to change the window to a place near the river. Alright, why don't you guys come with us? I'll treat you guys to a drink. That's not good. How can we always let Brother Yan treat us? Why don't we? Yu Qianchou dragged the latter part of his sentence on purpose. As expected, he was not disappointed. Yan Zhuixing grabbed him and said warmly, Brother Yu, you don't have to be so courteous with me. Please give me face. He dragged him away as he said, Damn it. Only an idiot would not take advantage of such an opportunity. Yu Qianchou blinked his eyes as he passed by Zitsong and the other 3. He said as he walked, Since Brother Yan is so hospitable, we won't reject him. Let's all come together. They looked at each other and followed him. Wu Lixue also saw Yu Qianchou blinking her eyes. She didn't know what he was doing with her brothers, but she thought it must be fun. So she followed them without inviting her. Sitting by the window and listening to the sound of flowing water, it was indeed a unique scene, although there were a lot of people around. Seeing that everyone had taken their seats, Wuxia sat beside her brother. It seemed that she didn't know how to be courteous. The people following Yan Zhuixing should be his underlings. They found a seat and sat down. This is... Yan Zhuixing looked at Wuxia and asked. Wu Liqing shook his head and smiled bitterly. This is my sister. I came uninvited, please forgive me, Brother Yan. Oh, so it's Brother Wu's sister. What a beauty. Yan Zhuixing praised. Hearing someone praise her beauty, Wu Lixue immediately smiled and glanced at Yu Qianqiu. It was as though she was saying, look at how good my taste is. You are the only one who doesn't know how to be protective of the fairer sex. Yu Qianqiu saw it, but he ignored her. The nicer you treated such a woman, the more cocky she would be. After a while, all the dishes were served. It was probably because business was too good that the waiter in the restaurant was too busy to take care of everything. The few of them drank and chatted, but they were all polite words. Yu Qianqiu placed more attention on eliminating the food. The dishes here were delicious. His table manners made Wu Lixue raise her eyebrows. Was it that delicious? She also had a huge appetite. Not long after, the wine on the table was emptied, but the waiter was too busy. At this moment, Wu Lixue volunteered, I'll go get it. Before anyone could react, she had already run to the counter. Wu Liqing said awkwardly, I've embarrassed myself in front of everyone. I'm used to being careless. I don't know what it means to be reserved. Why do you say that? This is your sister's true character. It's not something other women can learn, said Yan Zhuixing with a smile. Wu Liqing waved his hand and smiled bitterly. He looked speechlessly at his sister. Suddenly, his face sank as he stood up. He saw that Wu Lixue was being pulled by someone by the arm. When the others saw this, their expressions also darkened and they stood up. Yu Qianqiu was eating with relish. When he saw the few of them, he held a pig trotter that he hadn't taken a few bites of. He turned his head in confusion and was immediately taken aback. Taking liberties with an innocent woman in public? Following that, he instinctively swung his arm and smashed the pig trotter at the table. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.